coverage of the election, and we're joined by a couple of old friends here, Dr. Romesh Japra and Mihir Meghani. They have been scions in the Bay Area for a long time. We see each other socially, but they do have different perspectives on the world, which is perfectly fine. This is why we wanted to have them both on. Dr. Japra obviously has been around. I think don't you both live in Fremont? So I mean, you guys are truly hang around in similar circles, but you do have different viewpoints. Dr. Japra has started an organization called Americans for Hindus. It's a nonpartisan organization. Mihir is the chairman of the Hindu American Political Action Committee. Gentlemen, I want to talk about this election. It has been quite a dichotomy for the Indian American community, for Hindu Americans in particular, because we've seen a shift in American policy. We've seen a shift in the way India conducts its foreign policy. They've changed their constitution a year ago. They brought Jammu and Kashmir back into the fold, and that obviously rankled folks across the border in Pakistan. They had a border skirmish with China, which also complicated matters over the summer. So there's a lot of foreign policy issues that if you're Indian American, you're paying attention to. Maybe the general American population is not attuned to some of these issues. But obviously that impacted the election because President Trump got a lot of quiet support in 2016 from Indian Americans. I mean, I think we documented it pretty well here on Diya TV. But in 2020, the support was very vocal. So, Dr. Japra, I want to start with you. You're a man who supported Democratic candidates. You were one of the guys I saw front and center trying to promote Ro Khanna to Congress and helped him get over the hump. Now you're supporting his opponent in the District 17 race in Silicon Valley, a Republican, Ritesh Tandon. So talk about your personal transformation and what caused you to change the way you conduct yourself politically.
Absolutely, Ravi. First of all, pleasure to be on the show, and namaskar to all the viewers out there. And of course, hello to my friend Mihir. We've been working together for many, many years. So this particular question, I think it's a very, very good question. I think that was the reason, why we shifted. We as Indian Americans, have been working around in this country for many, many years. I've been the president of the Indo-American Forum for Political Education in the 90s. And of course, our main reason used to be Indo-US relations. We thought if the Indo-US relations are good between the two democracies, this is a huge thing for the Republicans all over the world. And here, as Indian Americans, especially some of the Indian Americans like Ro Khanna, Premla Jaipal, Amy Bera, we had some on the other side, Bobby Jindal. So we actually supported both sides all the time. And as long as they were Indian Americans, they had the cause at their heart. But unfortunately, some of these folks have been becoming, in the name of progressiveness, being progressive. And especially, you asked particularly about Ro Khanna, that's the story he gave us, that he's become progressive, then he had to the left, otherwise lose his seat. We said, okay, as long as you are still a Hindu and you are dharmic and you're taking care of all the Indian Americans, you're fine. But then he did a couple of things which were totally out of sight, especially when he said reject Hindutva, and then later on he joined Pakistan caucus, and then he didn't want to meet us in a group, but he wanted to meet one or two people at a time. Both Mihir, us, and all together, we gave him like over 200 organizations, memorandum that, this is something wrong. He didn't care about it. He did not want to take back the tweet. He did not want to track back. He even told us Modi doesn't do it, Trump doesn't do it, you expect me to do it. So basically, we told them that you throwing Hindu Americans under the bus. All the work we have done in the last 40 years, whether it's through temples, whether it's through cultural organizations, social organizations, all these things, even some of the finance organizations, the Thai groups and others, and he's throwing everybody under the bus. I said, all the hard work, just in the name of the progressiveness to become leftist, socialist, now going towards Marxism. He joined, Bernie Sanders. He became the co-chairman. There was a Pakistani guy who was the campaign manager of Bernie Sanders. He met Imran Khan through him, and then he joined the Pakistan caucus. So basically, he left us. He was not representing. Pramla Jha was another one. Of course, these guys, I don't want to repeat the story, what happened on the hill, the Capitol Hill. These guys went against CAA, they went against abrogation of 370, anything to do with India, they went against. In the name of, they become just too selfish, too self-centered, very ambitious. They wanted to rise up there. And that's the reason we took this. Okay, so that's the reason we thought this time that we should have somebody like Ritesh Tandon, who is a Hindu American. And of course, the Democrats are going too much to the left. We thought that the Republicans are coming more towards the center. They're not the right-wingers anymore. They're not the real extremists on the other side. So we're bringing them to the center. And we are aligned with them, our Hindu values, which are justice, equality, truthfulness, non-violence, peace, all these good values which Hinduism has, Hinduness or Hindutva, whatever you want to call it. We are beyond the religion. We are a culture, we are a civilization, a philosophy, and the ideology which we have as Hindus, we can share with everybody. Unfortunately, some of the Hindus, they feel shy to be even called Hindus. Now we are bringing this narrative that they should be proud to be called Hindus because the Hindu values are so good. Republicans are realizing it. They are aligning with us. Good mainstream Americans are realizing it. They think, why didn't you do this before? They are telling me now. Why did you have this South Asia, South Indians and South Indians, Asian Indians and all that stuff where all the Chinese and everybody else infiltrates, Islamists infiltrates. So we have the red forces, green forces, all these guys take us over. So now we have finally become Hindu Americans.
Dr. Japra, it seems like you don't have an opinion on the matter.
My opinion is as Hindu American. I don't know if I'm answering your question here.
No, I'm just joking a little bit because obviously you're very passionate about the issue. So, Dr. Meghani, please give us your perspective because you've supported Democratic candidates historically. Give us your thoughts on where Hindu Americans are now in the mix politically.
Yeah, first of all, kudos to Diya TV for hosting election forums along with a coalition of Indian American, Hindu American, Sikh American, and Asian American groups recently. And kudos to Dr. Japra for taking on a really big task of the first Hindu American super PAC with Americans for Hindus. I'll say on behalf of the Hindu American PAC, it's really an exciting election. I think the problems and challenges that face the pro-India community and the Hindu American community that puts its identity right up there, similarly to the way Christians, Muslims, Jews, and others put their identity up there in elections. This election has brought a challenge and an opportunity. There's a record number of Indian American and Hindu Americans voting. And when I say Hindu American, remember, we're not just talking about Indians. We're talking about Hindus who are African American, who are white, like Tulsi and Julia Roberts and Salma Hayek and others. They're voting in record numbers, and they're very interested in the issues. The second most important thing about this election is that there was a campaign to attack Hindu American candidates, whether they're Democrat or Republican. And it all started after Ro Khanna did several things that were against the interest and the promises he had made to the Indian American, Hindu American community. But thankfully, there's no other candidate who has gone the way that Ro Khanna did and others like Padma Kupa, Neeraj Antani, Rishi Kumar, Raja Krishnamoorthi, Shri Kulkarni, Jennifer Rajkumar, Kesha Rama. All these candidates have not made statements against India that were inappropriate or against Hindus. And they've understood that the values that Dr. Japra talked about, these are the values we want all candidates to have, and they're going to keep them. They're going to keep their promises. They're not going to sell out to the community. So there's an exciting election. And I think there are many people now who are engaged with India, who see the values that we have, Democrats and Republicans, and we've got more balance now. We're not just 90% Democrat. We're involved in both parties. We're going to have more candidates, and there are more people who are going to get involved from the local level and move up. So exciting time for Hindu Americans, and the best is yet to come.
We can't hear you.
Ravi, we've lost your audio about when you started talking.
My fault there. This is this virtual technology has me tripped up a little bit as well. I only have about 15 seconds for each of you. So, Dr. Japra, why don't we start me off real quick? Just express your thoughts. No matter who wins this election,
You're breaking. Yeah, I think it's
the role of Indian Americans moving forward. Like in both parties, are you willing to work with the Democrats to solve some of the questions you have for them, or are you now fully going in the Republican direction?
I think you're breaking. I really can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Dr. Japra?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, now you can hear me. So real quick, are you willing to work with the left once again to win, to get support from your PAC, or are you all in now the Republican Party moving forward? And same question to Mihir, vice versa.
Yeah. No, very good question, Ravi. We are as Americans for Hindus. We are Americans first, and we are trying to make sure that as American citizens, of course, we are looking after all the Hindus or pro-Hindus living in America from all over the world. Like Mihir said, not only India, even from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Fiji Islands, Caribbean Islands, and then, of course, our ISKCON brothers and sisters. So what we are trying to, with your question, coming along, Republicans and Democrats, we are not right, we are not left, we are dharmic, which means centrist. We are always centrist. So we are trying to bring the leftist people to the center. We are trying to bring the right people also to the center. So as center, that's why we are not partisan. We are not Republicans or Democrats or Independent or Green Party. We'll work with anybody who's in the center, who's willing to work with our community, our society. And if they don't, we may have our own party, Dharma party or whatever you want to call it. So I think because it has a centrist, and that's good for the whole America, that's good for the whole world. And all the democracies, all the Western democracies, the Eastern democracies, this is good. So whoever is working with us, we'll work with them.
Terrific.
Democrats, independents, or if they're none of those parties, we'll make our own party.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Japra. Dr. Meghani, real quick, on a similar theme, I mean, what do you think the future is here after this election?
Because of the a lot of the anti-India rhetoric that came out the last 2 to 4 years out of Congress and others, there's a tremendous interest now in becoming active politically across the community. Some people are going to be Republicans, some Hindus are going Democrat. But overall, there's greater interest. And there are many more people, such as Jennifer Rajkumar, who's going to be on your show later, who are attacked for no other reason than they wouldn't go out and say crazy things like condemning India and condemning Hinduism and their heritage. These people are going to now bring the values of Hinduism, which are pluralism, ahimsa or nonviolence, the environment, all these issues forward as Hindu Americans, as they should, focusing on America. And I think that we have much more to contribute. And I'm glad that we have this engagement when we look forward to working with other both parties and PACs and candidates and Diya TV moving forward.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to see you. Sorry it's under these virtual circumstances, but one of these days we'll grab a cup of chai once again. Dr. Mihir Meghani, Dr. Romesh Japra, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And speaking of Jennifer Rajkumar, she is joining us now from New York City. Jennifer Rajkumar is about to become the first Indian American woman to enter the New York State Assembly. Jennifer, it is so good to see you. How are things?
I'm so happy to be here. I just came back from the polls. I'm happy to announce that we won by a landslide at the polls tonight. But I just got the results. It's just over 70% of the vote so far.
Incredible. Congratulations. Well, let us be the first ones to say congratulations to you. Obviously, the primary, the system, the way it works out there, when you win that primary, you basically win the general election, and that's was expected tonight. Take us through campaign 2020. I mean, you have been involved in politics for a number of years now. You worked with Governor Cuomo, but before this particular campaign, what has it been like to be to go door to door? Is that even palatable? I guess you'd have to wear a mask. I mean, what has this whole process been like for you, especially as a young woman trying to get folks who may not turn out for candidates of color typically. How did you get this? Win in such a enormous fashion?
Well, when I first started out, they said you're a nice woman, but you have no shot. But we ended up beating the incumbent and not just winning, but we won by 27 percentage points, which was the biggest margin of any challenger the entire state this cycle. And so how did we do it? Exactly like you said, Ravi, which was door to door. And it was the direct voter contact. That's everything. That's where the real connections happen. And so we mobilized the district and went door to door. I remember knocking doors in the freezing cold, and I would shake a voter's hand, and my hand was like an icicle falling off in the voter's hand. And then when COVID happened, the last 3 months of my primary campaign, COVID happened, and my district in South Queens was hit very hard. So what we did was we shut down field operations, and we instead became a service organization, and we worked 24/7 to help families. We served food to hungry families. There was a family I called, and I learned that 3 people shared 1 piece of bread for dinner. And I ordered them dinner that night, and then we scaled up the operation. And suddenly we were serving food to many families that were going hungry. Also, we got doctors on the phone to talk to sick people in their homes, people who had coronavirus. So this is what we did. And I remember my dad telling me, I don't know whether you're going to win or lose, but no matter what, you have really helped a lot of people. But in the end, we did win. And now we'll be able to help a lot more people in a bigger way.
So when you head to Albany next year, what is on your agenda? Obviously, at the state level, and New York City in particular was really hard hit by COVID-19. I would watch Governor Cuomo's press conferences. In fact, we streamed quite a few of them here on Diya TV, and we saw the impact firsthand in New York City. Forecast what's going to happen in 2021 when you're up at the Assembly. What are some of the issues that you'll be dealing with firsthand?
This is the time for real leadership, more than ever, because unemployment is sky high in my district, and we need leaders that are going to focus on the economic rebuilding of New York. And that's a top priority for me. I'm going to make sure that our workers have the extra help that they need so that they can make it, so that they can survive these times. And I'm going to make the environment in my district more hospitable for small businesses. That's a top priority of mine. In addition, we need more funding from the federal government right now. We need the federal government to give more money to the state because we need to up coronavirus testing. We need to expand Medicaid because Queens actually has the second highest Medicaid enrollment of any county in New York. So I want to make sure that the healthcare needs of my constituents are fully taken care of. Those will be my top priorities.
Finally, your district is quite diverse. Tell us about how you're able to get all these folks to turn out for you. Obviously, the Democratic Party, and that's kind of the theme of the night, it's a big tent, but we have different folks ideologically that look at things differently. And certainly we have folks that didn't necessarily see Joe Biden as the candidate, and here he is now with a potential chance of winning the White House. And then, of course, you have folks like Bernie Sanders and everything in between. So how are you able to get all these folks engaged? And give us your sense of the Democratic Party moving forward. I mean, how do all these different groups come together for a common purpose?
One of the things that I'm most proud of is how diverse my campaign was. We won across political ideologies. We won Trump Democrats and we won conservative Democrats. And we also had many Republicans that crossed over and voted for us as well. And we also won across ethnic lines. We mobilized a new and emerging South Asian population, but we also won the Latino community in a landslide and the Caucasian community. So I would say that we were able to do this because right now there's a lot of extremity in our politics, but most people are neither extreme. So most people just don't have a place to go. And our campaign stayed true to the issues and stayed true to convictions, and we were able to reach most people who are neither extreme.
Well, we really appreciate you coming by on a historic night for you as you become the first Indian American woman headed to the New York State Assembly. And of course, for those of you that have watched our channel in years past. It was Jennifer and I in New York City. Do you remember that, Jennifer? On a cold New York City November evening at 3 o'clock in the morning, we did well, we basically told the world that President Trump had upset Hillary Clinton. And here we are 4 years later doing this virtually, and you are heading to Albany. So congratulations. Great to see you. Hopefully one of these days I'll see you in the next few years before hopefully this COVID thing will end sooner rather than later. But congratulations again from all of us.
Thank you so much.
Jennifer Rajkumar, she's headed to the New York State Assembly. And now we have another guest joining us who has a shot to get to the state Senate out in Vermont, and that's Keisha Brahm, who's also been with us a few times over the years. Keisha, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Give us an update on what's going on in Vermont and how your campaign went.
Thanks so much, Robbie. So we know we've won. The question is just how big. So we're in a really interesting Senate district, state Senate, and we're actually one of the largest at-large Senate districts, because even though we're a tiny state of 640,000 people, which is smaller than most square blocks in New York City, we have a Senate district that's about a quarter of the Democratic vote in Chittenden County. And there are 6 seats in that county. And we know that we're going to land first or second in those 6 seats. I keep refreshing to figure out if we're first or second, because I'm an overachiever like many Indians who've come before me. But we're just waiting to see where we land, and we know it's going to be in one of those 6.
So it seems congratulations are in order as well. I mean, my goodness, Jennifer, now Keisha, that's huge news, breaking news here. In fact, you've done this a few times before. I mean, I know you've run for office. You told me a great story at Impact a couple of years ago. I wanted you to share about how you got involved in politics, involving a certain senator in Vermont.
I hear screaming at my house, which probably means good news for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, for myself, for somebody. But actually, so let's start with, I grew up in my Indian immigrant father and my Jewish American mother's Irish pub in Los Angeles. And it was always shooting the breeze with a lot of different people in politics in Santa Monica and California, and really learning that you had to hold your own and pitch in the family business and make a difference. And so it was quite the upbringing. It was really helpful to get me here to Vermont in the cold and surviving this. And when I was a sophomore at the University of Vermont, I just wasn't afraid of anybody. And Bernie Sanders was running for the U.S. Senate for the first time in 2006, and he brought a rock star senator from Illinois to kick off his event at the university. And they said, you know what, we don't have a woman on stage. So they invited me as a student to speak, and that rock star senator from Illinois in 2006 said, you know what, Bernie, if you don't behave yourself, we're going to run Keisha for the Senate instead of you. And he turned out to be our 44th president of the United States, Barack Obama, and we both shared a ballot. I became the youngest legislator in the country, and he became our president. And that was my inspiration for getting in politics, and I'm proud to still be at it after some wins and losses. You have to. I want the Indian American community here that it's a risk, and it doesn't always work out, but it's worth it because representation matters, and for all of our young people to be able to dream as vividly and as greatly as they can, we have to win and lose and keep fighting. And after a couple of those losses, to be able to be the youngest woman in history and the first woman of color to be in the state Senate in Vermont is quite a feat.
Well, I see our team is rapidly updating the stats from your race, which I got to say I'm very impressed. They've got you with about 17,000 votes and counting, with 38% of the precincts reporting. So our crack staff here at the TV, which are keeping track of, honestly, like, I don't know, 70, 80 to 100 races. I don't know how we're doing it, frankly, but so you're well on your way.
Downstairs must have been for me, so that's good. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, what else do you have to impart? I mean, obviously, when you head to, I imagine it's Burlington, or is it to Montpelier, or where are you guys heading to?
12,000 people in our state capital.
Phenomenal. So, what is on your agenda in 2021?
So I think, like everybody has said, we're in a historic moment where we've spent 4 years kind of feeling constrained, but also having a lot of people in the majority start to see that many of us who experience marginalization and, you know, other forms of discrimination have a real case to be made for why we need to advance our civil rights and economic and racial and social justice. And so a lot of the things I introduced when I was a House member in my 20s before 2016 are back on the table, making sure there's independent investigation into police use of force that results in injury or death. You know, making sure that we have a strong environmental justice and environmental health focus, especially as we come out of a pandemic, where we know if you're sitting at home and you have a space heater and black mold in your basement, you're not doing particularly well, and you're not focused on climate change. You're focused on your own respiratory health. If you want access to healthcare and you haven't experienced it before, you're struggling and you're thinking about how this pandemic is something you can survive. So, and you're a small business like my father's Irish pub, and you know, you can't hire your staff back yet. So I'm trying to look out for the little person, which is something I've always done. And, you know, as a Hindu in Vermont, I think it becomes even more important to make sure that people whose voices aren't often heard are not left behind.
No question about it. Well, I certainly really enjoyed our conversation we had at Impact a couple of years ago, and we obviously knew you were headed for big things, and here you are once again. And I give you a lot of credit because sometimes it's hard to, you win a race and then you lose a race, and then to come back and to fight again, and here you are back in the saddle. That's a huge credit. Do you have anything to say about that aspect? Because I know there's a lot of folks that are running, that or have interest in running, that are watching this program. What do you have to say to those folks who, you know, may have taken it on the chin tonight or last year or the year before? How do you get back in the mix after losing?
Take it one day and one step at a time. Take care of yourself, rest, and most importantly, being able to reinvigorate yourself allows you to listen to people again. And in 2018, I just wasn't ready to run again because people were so angry, but I couldn't quite understand what was underneath the anger. I couldn't hear it. And sometimes you have to wait to really understand where people are coming from. And I traveled to every county in my state, listened to people in distressed, economically distressed communities, and I can hear their voices now as we face this pandemic. They were already hanging on by their fingernails. They need immediate action, and the urgency is real. And so I can go to our state capitol or Zoom or wherever we're going to go with that sense of urgency, but really built on a foundation of understanding where people are coming from and what it looks like for them to grow and thrive in a new economy and a complete pivot for our country. And you need that data before you can make that leap.
Well, you're going to have a lot on your plate, just like everybody else in the political world. And let's face it, all of us are still living in kind of an abnormal situation where we're trying to make do with these virtual sequences. I know it's made it very challenging for us to do some of these broadcasts and get the information out, but we really do appreciate your time. It's late out there in Vermont as the results are coming in, and folks all over the country are tuning in to see what's happening with the presidential election. But obviously, we're very interested in races like yours because who knows one day where your career is going to take you. But certainly, congratulations on heading to the state Senate, and we certainly hope to get updates from you in 2021. Thanks for joining us again, Keisha.
Much appreciated. Thank you all so much.
Thanks a lot. Keisha Ram, she's headed to the state Senate in the great state of Vermont. And as we hit the top of the hour, we want to start to give updates of some of the races that we haven't had a chance to update in a while. And one of them that just came down the wire is Colorado. And Joe Biden is projected to take the Colorado race. He actually appears to be to secure 9 electoral college votes. And the overall race, as it stands right now, Joe Biden with 89 votes and President Trump with 72 electoral college votes. So we'll be keeping track of those races as we are here at the top of the hour, coast to coast on Diya TV owned and operated stations and affiliates around the nation. I'm Ravi Kapoor. Really thankful that you're here with us as we're trying to keep track of all the big national races that are taking place, as well as local ones involving so many South Asian and Indian American candidates. And, I actually want to recount a couple of them here in Virginia's 11th congressional district. We had an Indian American lady named Munga Anatamula who was running in that district. She's actually the first Indian American in Virginia to make a run for that seat and was the Republican Party's nominee. And she was going up against a 6-term Democratic incumbent, Jerry Colony. And so we will update that race as time progresses. Right now, we have an update from Rhode Island. The 4 electoral college votes are going to Joe Biden. He secured that. And we're starting to get other projections from around the country as we try to find out if President Trump has secured a second term or if Joe Biden will enter the Oval Office in January of next year. Another projected result that we can announce is Connecticut. Connecticut, their 7 electoral college votes going to Vice President Biden. So we'll update some more of these races as they get in. But right now, joining us from the Scottsdale area is another person that's on the cusp of potentially joining the House of Representatives, and that's Dr. Harold Tippinani, who we had a chance to spend some time with last year as she embarked in this effort to claim this House seat against David Schweikert. Hiral, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy night. Obviously, the results are still coming in, but give us your thoughts on how your campaign has gone, especially in light of the fact that since I last saw you, COVID-19 is in.
Yeah. Well, Ravi, it's great to see you, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you at Diya TV. We're so excited. We're so excited about this campaign, this race. We have run what I believe is one of the fiercest campaigns and races. We have moved the needle considerably already. I am very excited and hopeful of the results. I'm not sure that we're going to get them, tonight. It might take a while, but we got to make sure every ballot is counted. But yeah, we've been working hard. We are excited. Arizona, as a whole, is such a pivotal player in this election. Our district is the only toss-up in the state. We're in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is the largest swing county in the country. So we're going to impact, with our ballot up and down, we're going to impact this entire nation potentially. So we're excited. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And I am so, so grateful for everyone out there who has supported us, who has cheered us on, and helped elevate the profile of this race.
Yeah, obviously, you guys have been going back and forth, a very competitive race in a district that typically has not gone for Democrats. So what has been the messaging that you found to be effective? Clearly it's a district that's leaned right historically. So what has resonated with your community?
Well, honestly, we've talked about the issues from day one. It's always been about the issues. When I started campaigning, it was going and listening. It was talking to folks, listening, asking them, where government could do better for them. What were the issues that they felt like they had not had good leadership on? And really, that's what it's about. It's about listening. It's about representing their issues, not my own agenda. And, they haven't had a real leader in years. Unfortunately, Mr. Schweikert has failed to lead. He has been too busy, towing the party line and taking a lot of corporate money. And meanwhile, families are struggling without health care. They're struggling worrying about their retirement security. They want to know that there'll be good paying jobs for their kids when they get out of school. All of these things are areas that he has neglected. And so they deserve a leader. We deserve to lead with trust. We should be leading with science and data. And so, those messages have been resonating. And I am so proud of the broad coalition that we have built with Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans.
So since you're a medical doctor, I've got to ask, the COVID-19 response at the federal level, at the state level, and at your local district level, give us your thoughts on that and what can be improved. Clearly, we have a couple 100,000 Americans that have perished, and some folks think, well, that's better than what was projected. And obviously, there's other folks who are irate that we've lost a couple 100,000 Americans. Give us your thoughts on what can be implemented should you get elected tonight.
Well, you're absolutely right, Ravi. We have not had a comprehensive national strategy, and that is an abject failure of leadership. And we've had it compounded by our lack of leadership here in Arizona. So look, we need a national strategy, and we need to make sure that that strategy is driven by data and driven and directed by public health guidelines and public health officials, epidemiologists, the experts essentially, and the science has to lead. So we need to expand our testing capacity. That still needs additional investment. We have to make sure we actually have an infrastructure for widespread contact tracing. We still don't have adequate supplies of PPE for frontline workers, for physicians, for folks who are out there always putting themselves at risk. And we still need to, really have a long-term plan of how we're going to, when we do eventually have a vaccine, how are we going to mass produce it? How are we going to distribute it? Who will be the first demographic groups to receive it? All of this needs a proactive approach and a data-driven plan, and we don't have that, unfortunately. We would not have seen the extent of death, the loss of life, and the pain and suffering had we led with science from day one.
Do you anticipate what we've suffered through here collectively as a nation in 2020 to extend deep into 2021 or likely the entire year? I mean, do you have some kind of sense of how long we're going to be facing this plight?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the $60,000 question, right? And look, I mean, I anticipate, we know that so many amazing researchers and labs are working on a vaccine, and we honestly won't be on the other side of this until we achieve herd immunity through a vaccine. It has to be via a vaccine, and that is going to probably take somewhere like another 6 to 8 months, quite honestly. I mean, if it's sooner, that's great, but we have to make sure it's fully tested, FDA approved, make sure it's clinically safe, gone through all the trials. And then once that's done, I mean, look, it's not going to be administered to everybody in one day. So it's going to take time before we can, see ourselves coming out of this. And we want to do it thoughtfully, safely. We want to do it using the data to guide us. And we want to make sure that all of our precautions that we've taken up till now were not taken in vain. We want to make sure that all of this effort we've done by wearing masks and staying home and socially distancing and all the businesses that have sacrificed themselves for the time being, we want to make sure that that is all for something. So we have to thoughtfully, letting the science guide us, come out of this, following the best medical advice we have.
But before we let you go, I wanted to ask about Arizona specifically. A lot of folks didn't forecast Arizona being in play at the federal level, but certainly Joe Biden is putting up a good fight against Donald Trump. This has obviously been historically a Republican state. Talk about the dynamics, because I don't know if a lot of folks are aware that we've had a huge influx of folks that have moved to Arizona, and it's changed the dichotomy of how of the political scene there.
Yeah, look, the demographics have changed considerably. Public opinion on the issues has changed considerably, and the problem is our leadership hasn't changed, right, to reflect that. And look, I've been in Arizona for over 24 years, and I've seen the transformation, and I've seen the population shift, the difference in ideology and thinking. And look, I mean, let's not forget, in 2018 we elected Kyrsten Sinema, our first Democratic senator in over, I don't know, I want to say like 35, 40 years. And we're about to elect another one. So, I mean, this is a reflection of where we are. But it has been a gradual transition. It has not happened overnight, but it has definitely happened. And I think we're on the cusp of sort of putting a pin on that transformation and showing just how far it's come. Hopefully with our victory, as well as maybe the state legislature, it's going to be a pretty amazing night.
Well, we look forward to hearing results. We'll continue to update our viewership on what's going on in your race and, of course, the Arizona race. And thank you so much for dropping by. I know it's a tense night because you can't exactly sleep until you know the outcome. But we're really appreciative you spent some time with us tonight. And best of luck. Certainly, we really appreciate your time over the years. And we certainly hope we get a chance to talk to you in 2021 as a member of Congress.
Thank you so much, Ravi. I appreciate it. And thanks so much to everyone out there who's been supportive and cheered us on. We're certainly hopeful for some really amazing change that will come to our country starting hopefully tomorrow morning. So thank you so much. Everyone take care and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. Dr. Harold Tippinani, she's running for Congress right now in the Scottsdale area of Arizona and is in a neck-and-neck battle right now with the incumbent David Schweikert. We've been monitoring that race very closely for the last really almost 2 years now, and here we are in a interesting battle in that venue as so many other races around the nation are neck and neck. And of course, the Biden-Trump race is neck and neck in so many different states. As we try to pull up some new information for you, I should actually give you an update quickly on one of the Senate races as we pull up some of the state data for Trump and Biden. One of the big races of the night, Jamie Harrison, the Democratic Senate candidate in South Carolina, he was upended by Lindsey Graham. So Lindsey Graham will continue on in the Senate for 6 more years in South Carolina. And Mitch McConnell will continue on in Kentucky. He ended up winning in Kentucky over Amy McGrath. So Graham and McConnell continue on in the Senate for the Republican Party. That's good news for allies of President Trump and for the GOP with real senior leadership. Obviously, it's a point of frustration for folks who may have wanted to see a different dichotomy. And now we have an update on the race in Illinois, Roger Krishnamoorthi, and against his competitor, the Republican Nelson, and obviously Roger Krishnamoorthi running away with that with 70% of the votes, 14% of the precincts are reporting. So it's not officially called yet, but obviously he is the incumbent and a likely victor in the 8th district of Illinois. We have some other races here to report as well beyond Congressman Krishnamoorthi's race, who he was very gracious enough to join us at the beginning of this program as we've been documenting all the Indian Americans and South Asians that have been running in so many different races. I mean, something like 70 races nationally we've been keeping track of. And so far, we've had some of the winners on, including Jennifer Rajkumar, Keisha Ram, and we'll find out about Harold Tippinani. Right now, we have results coming out of Virginia, and Qasim Rashid, who is a Democrat, currently, again, very early stage right now against Whitman, the Republican, and right now with the vote totals still in flux, but it appears that Whitman is up 69 to 31% in that race. So we'll be watching that. Rashid, a very heavily touted Muslim American candidate, originally from Pakistan, representing Virginia's 1st congressional district, but Rashid right now down 69 to 31% as we'll continue to track that race and so many others that we have going on. And let's see if we have another update here for a race that we've been following throughout the night, and that would be the Neeraj Antani race. Neeraj Antani, who is currently in the Ohio State of Representatives. He is running for state Senate. He's actually one of the youngest Indian American officials in the country. He's been obviously on our air a number of times, and we are looking to link up with him. So in this case, he is running for state Senate in the 6th district, and the Democrat he's facing is Mark Fogel, and you can see it's neck and neck, and I mean, just a small percentage divides them. Antani, of course, is being a Republican. He's advocating for the reduction of spending by his state government, and he has been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and he's been on the air many times, actually. It's his 3rd term in office in the Ohio State House. He was actually elected at 23 years old, and now he's 29. He's still one of the youngest, I think, still the youngest serving member, elected official in the country. He also chairs the Ohio Republican Party, Asian Pacific American Advisory Council. So we'll keep track of Neeraj Antani's race. In fact, we're hoping he can pop by as well. But obviously, when you have things neck and neck, it was very nice of Dr. Harold Tippinani to join us right as things are nerve-wracking in so many places right now. But we are fortunate now to have joining us someone that's been on the ground trying to get South Asians to vote. And it's been an amazing effort that we've been watching all over the country, where there have been grassroots, nonpartisan groups have been trying to get South Asians to vote. And let's face it, historically, Indian Americans and South Asians did not have a good turnout, but that's changed. Certainly in 2016, we saw an uptick, and there's no doubt with the results of 2020, with 100 plus million people voting in advance of Election Day, which is incredible. I think something along the lines of 110 million, in fact. The fact that we had this kind of turnout, it's only because of the incredible hard work of so many people. And right now, we want to introduce you Shobhana Verma from SAAPRI, which is based in Chicago. And Shobhana, I'm really glad that you can join us at this late hour from Chicago. And I wanted to find out more about your group and all the get out the vote efforts that you guys made, because I've seen so many different groups around the nation trying to get our community out and have their voice heard.
Hi, thank you for having me. And there's definitely a lot going on right now. As you mentioned, in a nonpartisan way. SAAPRI, the organization that I lead, has been involved in nonpartisan voter engagement for several years now. It's actually almost a 20-year-old organization. So we do have a history of civic engagement in the South Asian community. And as the name suggests, we are South Asian American Policy and Research Institute. So we do a lot of community-based research work, and civic engagement has been a major focus. And that's been a strategy that, really works well for us, so that we have the pulse of our community as we conduct our research and collect data for policy recommendations. So with that said, elections or civic engagement in general, we've seen our community is known to not be so civically engaged, unfortunately, but that has changed over the years. Our community is also one of the fastest growing ethnic groups here in Illinois. So that makes it all the more important for us to be involved and to make all the efforts as we can, so that we are able to engage and highlight some of the issues concerning our community at the same time. So SAAPRI this year, 2020 has been a very important year for us. We ran a campaign for Census 2020 because obviously data matters. So we want to see what the community looks like after the 2020 census. And the reason that's important for us is because after the 2010 census, the South Asian community, or in fact the Indian American community here in Illinois or in Chicago, and Chicago is a part of Cook County, the community was large enough where we had enough voting eligible population, which was also not proficient in English, which is why the Department of Justice then dictated the election agencies here in Chicago and Cook County to provide language access to the Asian Indian community. And that's how you will see in Chicago and suburban Cook County, voters can actually vote in Hindi, on Hindi ballots. So SAAPRI was very instrumental in bringing this program into place and also advocating for a successful implementation, working closely with the Chicago Board of Elections, working closely with the Cook County Clerk's Office. And we've kind of set an example there for the Asian Indian voters and also for the overall South Asian community, and that has now expanded to also ballots being available in Hindi, Urdu, and Gujarati for our voters here, for that matter. And we don't stop there, because we have the ballots available in these multiple languages, but we also have advocated for and work with our local election agencies and make sure that we have poll workers, we have all kinds of signages available in different kinds of languages, because we notice that when any community or any immigrant community or any ethnic group for that matter grows, we do have a very diverse community to serve. So a lot of members in our community, although eligible to vote, but were not engaged in the electoral process because they were not fluent in English, or the whole electoral process was too complex for them. So we wanted to make sure that we address those issues, we understand those issues, and we advocate for what's important for our community in a nonpartisan way. So that's what our approach has been. We've been able to engage our community, considering all the language barriers that we've seen. We've seen cultural barriers because our community is so diverse based on where they come from, the kind of democracy they're used to. We just wanted to make sure that we are working with all of those challenges that also come with a diverse community. So it's been working pretty well in terms of it's huge task to engage a community where we've also come across people who've lived in the United States for, say, 20, 30 years and been eligible to become a citizen or been eligible to register to vote, but that wasn't a priority. So that has changed over time, which is what we have seen. And we continue to engage people so that we not only engage our community members to register to vote, but also to show up at the polls and make sure that we get our voices heard. So it's been a long journey, but it's definitely encouraging enough for us to make sure that we can continue this effort.
Tremendous. And so ultimately, the impact of your work, how do you see it tangibly? Because obviously you're doing all this outreach in different languages. How are you able to quantify that kind of return on investment?
Good question. So if you look at it, Illinois is not a state where people have to disclose their ethnicity, right, or their race when they register to vote. So we won't be able to provide you scientific data on that in terms of what voter registration of the South Asian community looks like exactly. But at the same time, what I can tell you is when the language access program here in Chicago was implemented in partnership with other community organizations, and feedback we received in terms of when the decision was made that all the election resources would be put together and provided the community in Hindi. We also knew that our community members also spoke Gujarati and Urdu primarily. That's how the South Asian community is here in Chicago. So we wanted to make sure that even though the law required the election agency to provide all the resources in Hindi, we wanted to make sure that we had in-person language assistance at select precincts across the city in multiple languages. So all the behind-the-scene work came from putting all the resources, signages, ballots, all of those election materials in Hindi. At the same time, it was quite a challenge to go out in the community. And while we were encouraging voter registration in our community, where we really lag, but we were also in the same breath asking the same new voters to turn around and serve the polls as bilingual poll workers, because we also knew that knowing language barrier exists, and it is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people from our community may not turn out to the polls, because it could be a very daunting experience to show up at the polls and not really understand what's going on here. So we started focusing on recruiting a lot of bilingual poll workers, and it started from having less than 10 people who spoke a South Asian language at the Chicago Board of Elections to now easily, over 100. Like on an average, every election, there are 120, 125 poll workers serving our community members.
Well, Shobhana, this is part of the reason why we wanted you to come on tonight to talk about this, because there's so much unheralded work that's going on all over the country, and your group is certainly among them. So Shobhana Verma from SAAPRI, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And, we'll continue to monitor all this progress in this get out the vote effort, which is so important, especially amongst Asian American communities, South Asian, Indian American, since we have not had this kind of representation, historically in the political process. And now joining us is someone who knows this all too well, is Christine Chen, who's been, the executive director of APIA Votes. She has been involved at just the highest level of trying to get Asian Americans out to vote. Christine, it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Can you believe it? Almost at the end of the evening when all the polls are almost closed, all of them.
Well, I mean, let's hope it ends tonight. I mean, one way or another, I'd like a resolution, because this goes on for weeks. Man, none of us are going to get any sleep around here. I remember 2016. That was hard to digest, because it just seemed like we never had a day off for 6 or 8 months. But Christine, tell folks about the efforts your organization makes, because as we were just talking to Shobhana Verma from SAAPRI, there are so many unheralded organizations that do great work in getting Asian Americans, Indian Americans, South Asians out to vote, and certainly you guys are right at the forefront of it all.
Right. So Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote, we're a national organization that's nonpartisan, focusing on working with other nonprofit community groups in over 28 states. And our whole job is really to work with them every year to help them build their capacity to increase voter registration, voter education, and participation rates. And then also this year being the 2020 census to ensure that we get counted. I mean, it's all about representation and making sure that we're doing this work and making headway every single year. It's not about just the presidential elections, but every single election every year. So with our local partners, we do everything from trainings. Back in 2019, we went around to 50 different locations to build the capacity and broaden the coalitions of community organizations and volunteers to get ready for the 2020 census and the 2020 presidential primaries, as well as the general elections that we're seeing. And then moving forward, we were able to, this round to actually mail out to 700,000 households 2 rounds of translated mail, which essentially ended up 38 different types of versions because it had to be state specific, and we were trying to meet the language needs of the various communities. And then many of us were doing phone banking and text banking, and then also running digital ads, ensuring that we're able to go ahead and provide the information and making sure that all the AAPI voters made their plan to vote and implemented it. Also today, we started at 5:30 in the morning, and we're actually still running our 888 AAPI vote hotline. So even within the last 2.5 weeks, we received over like 3,000 or 3,500 calls into the hotline, answering questions, just everything from where's my polling location, where are my options for early voting, to even just reporting some suspicious behavior. And like I said, we're still going live until the West Coast actually closes their polls.
Let me ask you here finally, Christine, we've seen a huge movement of Asian Americans registering to vote, getting out to vote. All the indications are this is a record turnout. What are you seeing? And then also talk about the dynamic where Indian Americans in particular, which is a group that had not really engaged much politically in up until recently, we've seen them show up at the polls, and now they are engaged more than ever. What have you seen?
Well, the reality is that the Indian American community has been continuing to be engaged over this last decade. We saw the influx of Indian Americans getting involved during the Obama years as political appointees, as donors. But it's really exciting to see the Indian American community, South Asian community, and just overall the Asian American Pacific Islander community voting, not only voting in larger numbers, but voting early. I do know that, we were able to receive some initial numbers back in the first half of October, where they noted that 1.8 million or 20.3% of AAPI voters had already casted their ballot this year. And that's compared to about 17.1%. Now, out of that group, over 621,000 voters who voted early did not vote in 2016. So already we saw a huge influx of new voters coming into this cycle. And then with 18 to 29-year-old AAPIs who typically have the lowest voter participation rate, their early voting rates increased by 400%. For me, this is not something I'm really completely surprised, just because looking back at the last 4 years, we saw that the AAPI community get more organized around issues, getting engaged. Back in 2018, we saw an increase of AAPI turnout by 49%. And also, once again, looking at the younger generation, they also doubled their performance for a midterm election. And then just looking at in terms of what we've experienced this last year in the 2020 with the pandemic, with the rise of anti-Asian violence, I think a number of these voters understand how decisions are being made by elected officials and how the power of their vote really can really make an influence on how these individuals and what actions they'll actually take to make their lives better.
Well, Christine, you are really at the forefront of getting Asian Americans out to vote and engaging in the political process. So I really appreciate your time. And I've seen you put on presidential forums a few years ago, since I'm a member of AAJA as well. So thanks for all that you do for the community, because it really is important that we have folks getting, especially groups that are immigrant groups, engaged in the political process. And thanks for all that you do, Christine Chen from APIA Vote.
Thank you. We'll see you after the elections.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Christine. And now continuing on this theme of voter engagement, we have Chanda Parbhoo, who's joining us now from Dallas, Texas. Chanda is the founder of Save Texas, and it's a relatively new organization and one that I was really intrigued by, and I wanted to talk to her firsthand. So Chanda, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense of Save Texas, how it got started, and all the stuff that you guys have done, because I've been watching remotely. You have done an unbelievable work in engaging the community to get out to vote.
Yeah, so we started in the November 2016 election. We were a little bit frustrated with what had happened, and we started to ask around and learned that 50% of our population was not registered to vote. So that was the initial tentative of our organization, just to get as many people registered to vote. In the process of doing that, we started to hear the stories of our community, whether it was the racial discrimination that they faced at the supermarket or at work. And so we knew that we had to kind of change our trajectory of only doing voter registration, but also becoming sort of the voice of the community. And it kind of takes me back to sort of my origins in Texas. We've lived in Texas for almost 42 years. And I remember the days when there were so few of us, that if we did face any kind of difficulties in our community, it was oftentimes in the shadow because we didn't have a collective voice together. My dad faced discrimination oftentimes in banking institutions and in insurance institutions. And he really didn't feel like he had a community to lean back with and to have a collective voice. So fast forward to 2020. We knew that our numbers were increasing. We knew in 2017 that our population was really big. We had a really hard time finding the data on it. And I think that's one of the reasons that we often get overlooked. There's not enough data on the South Asian community. So that was one of the obstacles that we had to overcome. Fast forward to 2020, we have discovered that we are now the fastest growing minority population in the state of Texas. Currently, we have almost 267,000 South Asians that are registered to vote. Although we do have an obstacle to face because we have 400,000 people that are eligible to vote. So we have a long way to go before we meet that obstacle. But we're working really hard. We had a huge voter registration event that took place this summer, where we made contact with over 15,000 South Asians over the state of Texas. We were engaging people who had never been involved in the political process. So we were really excited about the momentum that we were creating. But it was this idea that we are a collective community and we aren't alone. As I said earlier, we felt so alone 42 years ago. And now we've built this community of people who are now activists and now feel empowered because they're part of something. They're part of this community. And so we have gotten together. Like I said, we've had an amazing year. If we accomplished one thing, and that was building a collective voice across the state of Texas. We had people that were doing the voter registration events. We had people that were leaving lit drops in their neighborhood. We were trying to make this very local so that people can get to know the people that are in their neighborhoods. People who were never politically active or didn't know what to say or what to do or how to get involved found something to do. We had almost 17,000 postcards that went out just a month ago. Texting, we did almost 200,000 texts to every single South Asian that had a phone. We have phone banked to almost 30,000 people. The majority of the volunteers that we have never been politically active. And so, some people are asking me, how do you know that you're a success or that you have accomplished your goals? And I would have to go back to saying, if we've involved somebody in the process that hasn't been involved before, we've succeeded. I think the comments that are coming back to me, this morning, which is really touching and chokes me up, and they said, I learned so much about politics in the last couple of months. I didn't know who my House district representative was. And now I was on a Zoom with them and I understand what the process is. I understand how politics in the United States works, which, I've been a citizen for the last 10 years and it just seemed like I wasn't connected to the process. And now all of a sudden I feel like I'm a part of the process. We were really interested with the numbers that came out. We are going to be the margin of victory in many cases across the state of Texas. We have a House district race where that particular race lost by 391 votes. We had almost 10,000 South Asians in there. We had 4,000 that didn't show up to vote. So our goal was to reach every single South Asian across the state of Texas and make sure that they understood the value of voting and that they weren't overlooked, and to remind them that we are this collective community that can speak up and can cater to their voice and make sure that their voices are heard, not only at the local level, but at the federal level as well. So I'm really excited about everything that we've done. I'm so excited about the hundreds of people that we have touched, not only to go out to vote, but to get involved and feel like they are part of the process. We're really excited, of course, to have Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, and I have to admit that had a lot to do with the momentum that our organization had. 42 years ago, when I arrived in this country as a 12-year-old girl, we faced a lot of discrimination, and I'd always felt like there was two different sort of communities. There was them who ran for office, and then there was us, and we were just constituents, and that's all we were ever going to be. It didn't seem like it was an attainable goal. And so to have her at the top of the ticket, I cried. I mean, I just cried because I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, like I can see myself in her story. I think Maya, her sister, said it well when she said, they often found that people looked down upon their mother because she had an accent. And I was like, I remember that for my parents. And I feel the pain that they endured for that. And so I feel like she's walked in our shoes. She is one of us. And I'm hoping that every 12-year-old girl can look at her and saying, that's me. It's not them and us. It's always been us. And this really has solidified that for our community. And so we're really excited about everything that's happening this year. And keeping our fingers crossed for a win for us tonight for her seat.
I mean, certainly Texas, nothing's been announced yet. I mean, it's been historically a Republican state. And tell us about your outreach to South Asians and how you were able to get Indian Americans, Pakistani Americans, Bangladeshi Americans, folks with different faiths, different viewpoints on the world. How are you able to get them all under one umbrella? And obviously you're an organization that wants folks to vote for Democrats. So how are you able to put all that together, knowing how complicated that dynamic is?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because even though we are the South Asian American Voter Empowerment Group, it is a diverse umbrella. And I think that was one of the challenges that we faced early on, is to make sure the Indian American community is the largest segment of that organization. But it was really important for us to reach out to include leaders in different communities to be a part of our organization. And I think the power of having everybody under one umbrella is very empowering. And so we were able to bring the smaller communities, like the Nepalese community, which I didn't have contact with until just this year. And they've been organizing and doing great things, but now we're under a bigger umbrella. And I think what was really important in the way that we organize is that we really talk to individual communities and break it down into regional areas. So people are then communicating not only as their individual region, but are also communicating with each other with a common goal of really getting to understand what's going on in that district. And the common everybody has this common thread of what is happening in their district. So I think that was key in really regionalizing our organizing so that we can offer sort of that on the ground type of personal interactions with people.
Finally, in terms of your outreach, what kind of impact are you having on congressional races? Obviously, it's tough to change, if you want to have Texas go blue, which is the intention of your group, it's tough to do that in one election cycle. But obviously, you're having an impact on the local races. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned that one House district race. We were really excited, and we're holding our breath. It's a really close race, so we're going to be probably waiting until the wee hours of the morning to see how that turns out. One race that we feel like we're doing really well is a Congressional District 24. It's very diverse, and we really felt like we hope that we have a person of color that does represent our community. That's in the Dallas area. One of the other races that we think we're going to have a huge impact in is Congressional District 22, which is in the Houston area. We're also waiting for the results to come in on that particular race. But that is the most diverse district in the entire country. And I think it's so incredibly important. And this is kind of the pitch that we had, is that we need to put people in office that look like us and that share our values. And, we have 51,000 South Asians in that district. A South Asian should be representing that district. And so, it has been an uphill battle. I won't deny that. In 2014, only 20% of our population came out to vote. In 2018, through the work of our organization, we were able to get 60% of the population to come out. Early voting, we had almost 65% of our population come out. So we're going to be breaking records this evening, and I'm hoping that it's going to impact the ballot up and down the ballot.
Well, we really appreciate your time, and thank you for the context. We're going to continue to follow your organization. There's so many folks, many of them nonpartisan, some of them with partisan bends, but all of them trying to get folks out to vote, especially South Asians, a group that frankly had not been participating much in elections. So I'm very glad to hear that you've made such a big push in such an important state like Texas. Chanda Parbhoo, thank you so much, the founder of Save Texas.
Thank you so much.
All right, now we're moving on to a couple of other folks that we've had on Diya TV in the past, and we'd like to have their thoughts on tonight's election, and that's Dr. Sampath Shivangi, who is part of the Republican Voices for Trump Advisory Board. Dr. Shivangi, great to see you. And we're also joined by Sanjeev Joshipura, who is part of the Indian, I should say, the Indians for Biden National Council. I hope I got that right. So both of you guys have fancy long titles, but both of you have had a lot of impact in your respective organizations. Tell me about Neha's here as well. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't realize that we actually have Neha Dewan joining us as well. This is great timing. I didn't expect to have you all show up at the exact same time. So Neha Dewan is the executive director of the South Asians for Biden. So we have a couple of Biden supporters and we have a Trump supporter. Let's go with Dr. Shivangi, since he's the Trump supporter and he's the incumbent. Give us your thoughts on tonight so far. Obviously, the results are still trickling in. Folks are on pins and needles. What are your thoughts tonight? Has everything gone according to the Trump plan?
First of all, thank you so much. It's been a great honor to have been on your show earlier, and it's a double pleasure to be for the second time. Thank you. I think the major states, still the results are being awaited. I think President Trump at this moment is doing much better than expected, at least in my thoughts. I think people didn't give him any chance. Now he has moved ahead. Even in Florida, he's ahead. He's ahead in Ohio. Of course, Pennsylvania may be a biggest issue. As you know, everyone says if you win Ohio, you are the president. So 90% of the time, whoever have won Ohio have been president, except maybe one or two occasions in the 200 years of history of US. So I'm very hopeful President Trump would continue his economic policies with the lowest unemployment in the history of the US, highest GDP in the last 2 to 3 years. Of course, COVID completely changed the formula, and if he can win COVID, probably he go as one of the best presidents. At least
there's no question. no question, Dr. Shivangi, COVID-19 has changed the dynamic. Neha, Dewan, let's go to you. Running this grassroots South Asians for Biden group, I must say we have covered your efforts extensively on Diya TV, and I'll be frank. I mean, we covered 2016. We saw the Trump momentum in the community building throughout the year, and I would tell my friends working at major news organizations, and they thought I was nuts that I saw Indian Americans moving towards Trump. But this year, I have seen an incredible amount of outreach by the Biden campaign, largely directed by your efforts. So talk about that, because I'm actually blown away at how many different things you did to try to appeal to South Asians to vote for Biden.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's more of, we just didn't want to leave any stone unturned. We certainly wanted to make inroads with the community. We heard the community. We listened to any concerns that they had. And certainly a lot of it was just misinformation coming from, the right. And so we wanted to correct that misinformation. And so we really targeted that surgically. And in different ways, whether it's, through the national councils, whether it was through the faith-based groups, through our event programming, messaging, video content, whatever it was. But really also it was because, for the first time in a very long time, the community was speaking and we were listening to that. So this was really a product of the community's, outreach, I would say, to groups such as ours in terms of what they wanted for themselves.
Sanjeev Joshipura, in his day job as the executive director of Indiaspora, but this is a completely separate endeavor where you were asked to lead the Indian, be the national director to get Indian Americans on board for Vice President Biden. Tell me about the hurdles that you face, because obviously the messaging from the Trump campaign has been fairly strong, especially in recent years. Going to India earlier this year, the last major trip that he took, of course, the Howdy Modi event that we all recall from a year ago. What were you able to do to get Indian Americans to look at the Biden message and the Biden platform? What did you do to get them to reconsider a Biden-Harris ticket?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Ravi, and great to be on the air with Sampath as well, who I've interacted with on a few occasions in the past. And my good friend Neha, who I work with very, very closely at South Asians for Biden. So as regards Indians for Biden National Council, Ravi, I think a couple of things. So first of all, I will say that there has been this narrative that has been, I think, propagated by some on the right among the Indian American community, that there has been some kind of a wholesale movement, an en masse movement of the Indian community from the Democratic side to the Republican side, which really reputable surveys bear out is simply not true. Indiaspora conducted one of these surveys in conjunction with AAPI data. Another was conducted by Johns Hopkins University and Carnegie Endowment. And both of these surveys found that there is still the majority, to the tune of 65 to 75% of the Indian American community that is in the Democratic camp. That's number one. But number two, having said that, obviously you don't want to rest on your laurels and take things for granted. As Neha said very correctly, we were out turning out every last vote at Indians for Biden National Council, and we did a lot of grassroots activities in terms of holding virtual events, get out the vote events, phone banking that was actually directed by South Asians for Biden that we brought our volunteers to. A lot of rapid response during the debates on social media, a lot of messaging via newsletters. So essentially really countering some of the misinformation that came from the right, and then also providing a lot of very positive articles and reasons and rationales about why, based on Biden's and Harris's own words and platform, that they are the better ticket by far for the Indian American community and for U.S. Indian relations.
Dr. Shivangi, do you want to respond to what Sanjeev's saying? Because obviously I've seen these surveys too, and I do think the data has come back. 2016, it was a very strong support for Hillary Clinton, and we hope to have Karthik Ramakrishnan on from AAPI data in a little while to talk about that. But Dr. Shivangi, what kind of data did the Republican Party see, and what are you seeing from the Trump campaign?
Yeah, first of all, let me thank Sanjeev, he has been politically very active and has done a lot of help to Indian community, and I respect him and Rangaswamy, who had the pleasure of meeting first time in Howdy Modi event, where Trump was the, rising star or the star of that show, and we had a lunch together, and uh, the reason I feel Trump is good for India. He has shown his positive commitment towards India or Indian Americans. He had one of the highest number of appointees in the administration. We took in the first term of his presidency, he went to India and he stood by Indian cause like 370, Article 370 or CAA, and and now with recent, as you've seen, they have exercise in Malabar Coast with US, Japan, Australia, and India. I think there's a big deterrence to China. I think China will not dare. I think that has changed the hearts and minds of Indian community. I'm in the AAPI for last. I'm the founding member of AAPI petitions group, and we are about 130,000 members. But now I can see in the one WhatsApp group, the majority of them have turned towards President Trump because what he has done to India in last 3.5, almost 4 years of his presidency. And that really has definitely turned. If you see what happened in Howdy Modi event, the whole auditorium or the stadium was rocking for U.S.-India friendship, and that has changed the scenario
Yeah.
in favor of.
So, Dr. Shivanga, I wanted to pose a question quickly to Neha because we do have other folks that want to join us. Neha, real quick, were you guys able to accomplish all the goals you set out when you started Salvations for Biden? Do you guys hit all the metrics, or do you think there's still room for improvement?
No, I think that, we really were able, actually even probably surprised ourselves in the way that we were able to unify the community. We truly, appreciated and celebrated differences, but really were able to unify towards a common goal, because what we realized was this government and this leadership was not for our community. So I think that, I certainly can speak on behalf of the entire board to say that, yeah, we probably, surpassed where we, started in terms of what we wanted to achieve. And we're just waiting for the results to reflect that, truly.
That's right. And Sanjeev, I want to quickly pose to you, from what you've seen, do you believe that the messaging from the Biden campaign was massaged well enough to overcome the very strong Trump messaging?
Well, I will say, Ravi, that maybe massaging, if you will pardon me here, is perhaps even the wrong premise. Because I do think that if you look at the substance of what Biden and Harris have said in various different regards, such as U.S.-India relations, such as their comments on, being a welcoming ticket for the Indian American community, it stands out very clearly that, they are a great ticket for our community. So there wasn't even that much need for massaging, to be honest with you. What was needed was a sharpening of the focus and the communications. And I hope that Indians for Biden National Council, through our volunteers' relentless work day in and day out, in conjunction with SAB and with Neha and her team, really hoped we move the needle in some crucial battleground states.
Excellent. And Dr. Shivanga, you have the last word. Do you feel that this is Donald Trump's night, or give me your impression of tonight's result?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be unbiased, even though, a friend of President Trump. I had the pleasure of having lunch and dinner many times with him, but it doesn't matter. But my goal is what is good for Indian Americans. And since we moved from India, we have a lot of respect, regards for our motherland. And whoever is helping us, I think we should accept their their help and gratitude. And I think he deserves 4 more years. This is my feeling. Of course, many of my Indian American friends definitely are with me. I just wanted to say in 2016, President Trump got only 16% of Indian American votes. I bet this time he will go beyond 40% at least.
Well, I've heard that from, I know you have another colleague of yours who we hope to have on here as well, Al Mason, who's the co-chair of the Indian Voices for Trump. And he said, hey, it's going to be 50%. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but certainly it's going to be a very tight race throughout the night. I mean, we can see the numbers right now. Thank you so much, Neha, Dewan, Sanjeev Joshipura, Dr. Sampath Shivangi. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it. Continue to enjoy your election watching festivities because this race is tightening up. And we are bringing on someone now that understands firsthand what it's like to work for the Trump administration, and that's Dr. Vanila Singh. She ran for Congress in the Bay Area in the 17th district, which is now where Ro Khanna resides. And Dr. Vanila Singh spent some time in Washington during the Trump administration, and she's back now in the private sector, working at Stanford. But she is on the Indian Voices for Trump advisory board, and we're really glad to see you. It's been a while, Dr. Singh. How are things going for you?
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much, and good evening, Ravi. Things have been great. It has been quite a night and quite a time since I first started with the administration, which was about 2.5 years ago. And I got to say that, I think that things are looking really good, and we're really happy to see that the different states are proving true with what we believe, which is that really it's a moment to me for freedom and liberty and the American dream. And really, ultimately, I think not only in our nation, but really the world is pulling for this, for those people who want their own ability to design their destiny, if you will. So really great to be here. Thank you.
So tell folks about your role actually in the administration, because I know you were on the forefront of the opioid epidemic and confronting that. And for those folks that aren't aware, I mean, you're a practicing medical doctor. You're back at Stanford now, but you decided to take a leave of absence to go serve in the administration with one of your tasks to take on opioids.
Absolutely. So I had really the privilege and honor to be the chief medical officer in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. That's the largest agency, second only to the Department of Defense, 1.2 trillion large. And I went there to serve in all capacities for medicine. But the big public health issue that President Trump declared was a public health emergency was, of course, the opioid crisis. And I was privileged to not only work on that issue, but I chaired the congressionally mandated task force that dealt with HHS leading the cause with the Department of Defense and the VA. And as you know, Ravi, this is such a big issue because it afflicted so many people in the United States who, if you really tie it all in together, who had lost jobs, had been forgotten, manufacturing jobs went across the country, mental health being ignored, illicit substances, fentanyl coming from China, and heroin across the border going into our communities, an unbelievable number of people who died of overdose deaths. And then, of course, the people with chronic pain who are legitimate pain users were being punished for all of this. And it's really a mess. And during the 2016 campaign, President Trump brought this to light. He saw on the campaign trail so many people who had been just in great areas, you would think, were dying of overdoses. So that is something that we are tackling. Unfortunately, in the COVID era, this issue has resurfaced. But it's really a great honor to work on that and so many other medical issues across the nation.
So take us through this process tonight. Obviously, 4 years ago, we were both in Cleveland. I think there's some clips that still show up on the air once in a while of you and I talking after the RNC in 2016. And you had a strong sense that at that time, Donald Trump would come out and defeat Hillary Clinton, and your efforts and your insight was proven to be true. What do you think about this year's race? I mean, the dynamics have changed. In 2016, Donald Trump was an unknown candidate, came out of nowhere and catalyzed a number of Indian Americans, yourself included, to support him. I've certainly seen a larger movement in 2020 to get Indian Americans to support his race. Do you feel like the odds are that he continues to be the favorite? I mean, the polls coming into today were saying that Joe Biden was the favorite.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One is we had a great time. Always, you're just wonderful to talk with and discuss things with. So I definitely remember the RNC and our discussion. And what happened in 2016 is still there. I think a lot of these polls, unfortunately, do not give a real-time understanding of what the sentiment of the country is. And I think it really comes down to the average person feeling ignored, their issues, their jobs, their opportunities and prospects are limited, and taxes are going up, burdens go up, regulations go up, the ability to start a job declines, and people who are really the upper crust miss this, and they missed it again in 2020. I think these polls do not understand the pulse of those people. I feel that, and I see that with my patients who are everyday people, and they tell me how they feel, even here in California. And so I think that's the sentiment that gets missed. And it's a really important sentiment because it's something that crosses all communities. It is not just a rural issue or an urban issue or a Black issue or a white issue or an Indian American, Asian, Hispanic. It's across the board. We're all people who have a desire to have a good life, have our destiny in our hands, and we don't want things to get in our way, and we certainly don't want things to seem unfair. And they do often feel unfair. With President Trump, you were right, he came in as an outsider. He remains an outsider in the sense that he has not become DC and has not taken on their ways. In fact, just the opposite. He has really brought his ways of a common sense, hard work ethic approach. Sometimes it's rough, and we know that that's tough for people to see because they want to see a statesman who is president. But what the people want is somebody who is actually speaking to them and who isn't, in fact, looking beyond them and talking down to them. The president has always maintained a conversation with the people. He's never, in my view, been condescending. And I think that continues to this day, which is why I think we see the polls the way we do. And hopefully it'll remain being a good night.
Well, I mean, we're getting some interesting data right now as the polls have closed on the West Coast. California, Oregon, and Washington all just went to Joe Biden, as expected. And we're joined by Dr. Vanila Singh, who served in the Trump administration and is now back at Stanford on the front lines. And I do want to ask you before we let you go about COVID-19. This pandemic has affected so many folks. And of course, a lot of people in our community are medical doctors like yourself. Many members of my family are medical doctors. How has this been for you and for your colleagues to deal with? Because I think in many respects, you guys are quietly doing your duty. I don't see a whole lot of doctors jumping up and down on television. They're just out there serving all of us and keeping us healthy and safe, and in many respects trying to get us back to health. What are you seeing now? Obviously, we've had this huge surge here as the fourth quarter has begun of this year. Are we going to be facing this pandemic for another 12 to 18 months? Is that something that you guys are talking about internally?
Well, it's a really important point. It's actually what I've in fact been talking a lot about in the media about COVID-19, and it is a virus that came out of nowhere. Truly, perhaps from China. There are a lot of issues that will have to be sorted out with that because there is an opportunity early on that they could have certainly got the international community on early, and that was a tough thing. We closed the international travel to China first. I think that was a really important move. And I know people see this politicized, but it's not. It's in fact what probably prevented things from even getting worse. It's a bad situation, but it could have been far worse. The really upside in all this that I see from a scientific perspective is the rapid pace of scientific innovation that has been incredible in terms of the rapid development of this vaccine and these late stage trials from so many companies that has really been funded by the public money out of the government. to these companies that have the expertise and know-how. And the medical therapeutics, which have, when we talk about turning the corner, we're not talking about the virus disappearing necessarily, but the ability to fight the virus. We know a lot more about it. We saw with the president firsthand him succumbing to the COVID-19, but the polyclonal antibody that he took, that cocktail, and the remdesivir changed his course, shortened it tremendously, which once that's able to be done in emergency use and then eventually for the vast, broad population, I think is going to be a game changer. So it's not just the vaccine that's going to be important, but these medical therapeutics that are so many and so quickly have we come to that. It didn't happen with HIV and a lot of other viruses. If you think about the common cold and many others, we still don't have great therapeutics for those. So this is really an incredibly exciting time, I think, in terms of science. And as far as people go, young people still are less likely to succumb to COVID, but we all have to do our duty and do all the things that are important to prevent the transmission to the vulnerable. And that's something that we can all feel empowered about, that we can help. I would always advise, and as I say to my patients, don't live in fear, find empowerment and know that you can only mitigate risk. You can't eliminate it, because if you totally eliminate it, you bring on other problems. So I do think that we are far better off than we were 10 months ago, and we're only getting better because we finally have the science to really get to solutions. And ultimately, let's hope the virus attenuates, meaning lessens, and eventually becomes something that, even if it stays with us, is a very mild disease. So that's kind of the course that I see, and hopefully we will be able to see that expedited in the coming weeks and months.
Do you have a timeline for us before we let you go?
Well, I think there's a lot of talk about Moderna's late stage announcements and Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, perhaps in the next few weeks. I think that it will be targeted when it gets initial emergency authorization use to the vulnerable, the elderly, as it should be, and the frontline workers, as you mentioned, the healthcare workers who are all of us who are working in this capacity, and then, of course, the broader general population. But that's what I would really look for. And I think once that happens, a great reassurance comes to businesses, to schools, for our society to finally feel like, we're headed in the right direction, which in many ways we are. One other point I want to make is that we may see and hear a lot of this news about the surge, but remember, having cases is expected, particularly as we re-engage in society. The testing also is contributing to that. The more we test, the more we know, the more we count. But the key parameters to watch for are hospitalization, ICU, but most importantly is mortalities. What is the bad clinical outcome? And fortunately, so far, that has improved dramatically. So let's hope it stays that way.
And I would be remiss to let you go without asking this question, because you did run for Congress not too long ago in a very competitive race against Ro Khanna, and you fell short, but not by that much. And now you've moved to another district. Are you gearing up for another congressional run, perhaps?
I can tell you, Ravi, you would be definitely first to know. I mean, but I never say never, and always love public service, and I've been very humbled by the federal government, and certainly being back in the Bay Area has been wonderful. So, I'll look for ways to help.
Well, it was great to see you tonight, and of course, all this stuff is virtual, and it's a little bit different than experiencing it firsthand at a convention the size of the RNC, and that was a remarkable event. So was the DNC. I mean, just a lot of similarities, and there's some differences in the demographics of both parties. But this is a totally different ballgame, and we'll see whose message has resonated, because a lot of this is just happening virtually and through TV and social media, and it's a totally different ballgame here in 2020. But we really appreciate your time, Dr. Vanila Singh, who's on the Indian Voices for Trump Advisory Council, and she also served in the administration. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Great to see you, Ravi. Oh, and I do want to say, what my kids told me to keep my Trump shirt on, which is why I usually change for your shows. But I do have that on, and they challenged me to stay in it, so I did tonight. So it's always a fun thing, and I always have fun on your show. So there you go.
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Vanila Singh, we appreciate your time, and we are going to take a quick break and come right back, because we have some new races to report upon when we get back. The West Coast has just closed up, and we got some more races to report on when we return.
And Doug.
And if we win, we get to tell you how Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance, so you only pay for what you need.
Isn't that what you just did?
Service!
Stand back, I'm gonna show ya how Doug and Lee will roll ya. You know you gotta live it if you wanna win.
Time out.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
At touchofmodern.com, you'll find products that defy expectations for those who seek the extraordinary. Tents brave the Arctic. Coffee tables chill drinks. Rowers are powered by water. And that's just the beginning. Go to touchofmodern.com and venture through a curated collection of the highest quality in fashion, tech, and home, with new items added every day. Touchofmodern.com. Lead the pack. Be the first to discover all the novel and noteworthy products the world has to offer.
Personal Capital wants to know, are you worried about the state of the world? How about your retirement? It's time to get a plan. Download award-winning, free professional-grade tools and take control of your financial future with Personal Capital. See if you're on track for retirement success and get financial confidence. Are you ready to take control? Join millions of others and download free financial tools today at personalcapital.com.
I'm Doug Hirsch. You may already know that GoodRx can help you save up to 80% on your prescriptions. Unfortunately, many Americans can't get to a doctor right now. The good news is that for many health issues, you can see a doctor online. It's easy. Just go to goodrx.com, and with a few clicks, you'll be treated by a licensed medical professional, all from the comfort of your own home. Visits are confidential and affordable. Need a prescription? Your doctor can send it to your pharmacy or have it mailed to you. Get the healthcare you deserve at goodrx.com.
and you shouldn't give them your vote because it's a vote for socialism. That's really what it came down to. And I think it's unsurprising to see a lot of these early numbers come in. Look, I mean, Biden's holding the states he's expecting to hold. Trump is, Florida is in his column. But there was always a path forward for Biden without Florida, and there still remains one. Biden's had many paths. And I think that's the part where tonight I'll be going to sleep knowing it's a long night and I'll be up again very early, but I am not as sad as 2016 because I knew that this was going to be a very different scenario due to these early ballots.
Rena, I have one quick question for you because we do have, so much to get to tonight, but
Sure.
Take me through the Republican Party moving forward. President Trump has obviously brought together a different kind of movement. So you are a Republican that obviously doesn't see eye to eye with the president. So what is the Republican Party moving forward? I mean, if you're not on the Trump bandwagon, then where do you fit in the political spectrum?
I think if the president is successful in re-election, what I will see is that I will have to consider another path for myself. Staying as Republican in name only these past 4 years was something that I felt I had to do because I thought that this would be a great opportunity to see, for the country to really see what I thought I saw very early on, which is that this president really doesn't stand for very much. He doesn't make good on his promises. It's election day today, and we do not have a vaccine. We do not have a wall fully built with our southern neighbor, Mexico, that was paid for by them. So the president, to me, is very much a liar, and he's somebody who is gaslighting the American public on the daily. I couldn't be part of that kind of party moving forward in good faith. I'll have to seriously reconsider. I have considered it over the past couple of years to say, if I want to be the agent of change I really seek to be in society, then perhaps I would need to figure out another political affiliation for myself. But I have long been part of the Republican Party ever since I was 18 and registered with this party. I've matched up fiscally with the values. Socially, of course, I'm a little different. And I think a lot of people would say that in my age demographic, who are millennials between the ages of 25 and 39, those Republicans are like me. We're not socially entirely there like the elders of the party. And I don't mean to discount those who are very socially conservative who are in my age range in the party, but I'm just saying that's been the party's fiscal message that does keep a number of us around. I think moving forward, if the president is still the party standard bearer, we are going to really have to reconsider affiliating with this party. And that's very sad. That's really sad for me because I just was not expecting this. I thought that the American people could see how poorly this president has handled this pandemic, how his words have caused a great deal of strife for so many demographics of people across the country. And then frankly, the third thing I just want to mention very quickly is that the Republican Party doesn't seem to really care about what I stand for as the daughter of immigrants. They seem to recruit tokens to put up time and time again. Folks like Rick and Mehta, who lost horribly tonight to Senator Cory Booker in New Jersey. And I think people like MAGA, and I don't want to butcher her last name, so excuse me, who's running in Virginia 11 here. These folks are not anybody that I would feel comfortable getting behind, but this is who the Republican Party is putting up. And so that would also contribute to my decision to perhaps exit the party very soon if Trump is reelected.
Well, Rena, I will say this. I mean, there's a huge umbrella on the Democratic side of the ledger, and there's a lot of folks that look at what's going on in that party, and they're conflicted. And certainly there's folks like yourself that are Republicans that don't like the way that party is being run. And these are the two big national parties. But certainly there might be, this is where I think 45% of folks kind of lean independent at this point. So it's an interesting dichotomy. We'll continue to follow it, and we really appreciate your insights. Rena Shah, we'll see how the results go. I don't think it's going to be settled tonight, but we appreciate your time.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rena. Appreciate that. And now we're going to go to Karthik Ramakrishnan, who's the founder of AAPI Data. And we've been trying to get him on for some time now, and I'm glad he's able to join us now because Karthik has really had the pulse of data for Asian Americans and specifically Indian Americans as well, because our community has just burgeoned in recent years, and there wasn't great tracking about where we are, especially as when it comes to politics. And Karthik, I'm so glad you can join us for a moment. Give us your impression of the turnout. Asian Americans in particular, it seems to have had this robust turnout all over the country. Indian Americans seem to be turning out. What kind of data have you culled so far?
Thank you for having me, and I'm hoping that my connection is all right. What we're seeing, this looks, even before Election Day, we knew that this was going to break records in terms of turnout, and it's not just in the general population. Traditionally, when it comes to Asian Americans, turnout is not as high as it is for the rest of the population. And so, but among Indian Americans, that is, we do see relatively higher turnout among Indian Americans than you do for other Asian Americans. That said, I think when all is said and done, 2020 will have set records for Indian American participation. But did it make a difference? Texas looked like it would have been closer than how it's turning out to be. I think when all is said and done, there is so much anxiety going into this election, and given the fact that we might not know the winner for another few days, might continue to cause a lot of angst among people. But I think one of the things that I think nearly everyone will be proud of is the level of engagement and interest and the record levels of turnout that we will see in 2020. Now, in terms of how Indian Americans voted, I'll say that the survey that we did, which was the Asian American Voter Survey, showed that Donald Trump did, in fact, make inroads in the Indian American community from 16% in 2016 to, if we had projected out so it was 28%. There were a few undecided. If they broke the same way among those who decided, maybe up to 30% of the vote this time around. So, there are advantages of being the incumbent, and specifically when it comes specifically it did make a difference. Final thing I'll say is that we found a gender gap this year that was not apparent in 2016. So Trump made inroads among Indian American men, and especially naturalized citizens and middle-aged Indian American men. And that's something that I think that we need to look at. It's not just thinking about Indian Americans as a block, but looking within our community, the difference between the long-term immigrant residents, those who moved here in the last 25 years or so, in the last 15 to 25 years, that group looks different from those who had arrived before then. They also look different from the population born in the US. So I think it's important for us to have a more nuanced understanding of the Indian American community. All that said, Indian Americans are still overwhelmingly voting for Biden, as they have for Democrats over the past several election cycles. But I think it is important to acknowledge some of the differences that are emerging, and that Donald Trump has gained some ground in the Indian American community.
Let me ask you one more thing here, Karthik. If you're the Democrats, if you're the Republicans, what kind of advice would you be giving them, given the dichotomy that Indian Americans have slowly gone towards President Trump's message, and this group, which was largely voting Democratic, is now in play in many states. And I've had many senators come up to me and say, "Hey, Ravi, I want to talk to the Indian American community because I like what they're all about." And these are very prominent names that you wouldn't think they would have interest in the community, but I've seen that firsthand. Do you have any suggestions for the Democrats and the Republicans moving forward in terms of getting Indian Americans to engage with their respective parties?
Absolutely. First of all, don't take Indian American support for granted, right? Don't assume that just because they've consistently been with one party that they'll always remain so. It's important to note that the Indian American population is one of the fastest growing immigrant populations, high rates of naturalization. So this is a community that renews itself every 4 to 8 years. So you can't assume that whatever you tried 4 years ago or 8 years ago is still gonna stick. It's also important to look at the financial power of the Indian American community. It is a community that is increasing in its political contributions. Democrats have largely benefited from that. You saw that in the presidential race. You've seen that in many congressional races as well. But again, Democrats should not just take it for granted as a reliable donor bank and a vote bank without making sure that they are addressing their concerns. Now, it's not just about US-India relations. Healthcare is an important issue. Many Indian Americans care intensely about healthcare and making sure that there is adequate access to healthcare and affordability of healthcare. Good, high-quality education and economic opportunities are also important. So we need to make sure, both parties need to make sure that they are talking and addressing the issues that the community cares about, as opposed to necessarily what the party leadership wants to talk about. So that's a kind of responsiveness that I agree with you. There is an increasing level of awareness and interest. I will also say it's the increasing flexing of the political muscle of Indian Americans with this growing population, growing donor population, and growing voter population.
Karthik, it's always great to talk data with you, because you really understand it at a very granular level, especially when it comes to AAPI communities. Thanks for swinging by tonight. We know things are frenetic all over the country as these races are still very much up in the air. Karthik Ramakrishnan, the founder of AAPI Data. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And now we're joined by a couple of men that I've been forecasting to bring on this program since we decided to do this broadcast. And these are two men that have been really at the forefront of getting Indian Americans involved in the political process. And they've done it in different ways, and they're both representing different parties. But I think in the spirit of bipartisanship, I wanted to have them on to talk about their roles in their parties, and obviously the results of tonight, which are still very much in flux, but more generally, what we can do to bring Americans together. And so I'm very pleased to have Shekar Narasimhan, who is the co-founder of the AAPI Victory Fund, and Shali Kumar, who's the founder of the Republican Hindu Coalition. Two men I respect tremendously, two men who've been incredibly successful in business and have turned their attention to politics at a time when, let's face it, they probably didn't have to, but they've both taken interest in the American political process. Gentlemen, it's really great to see you here tonight.
Nice to see you, Ravi. Nice to see
Great
you.
to be with you, Ravi, and I would first like to thank you for connecting me to Shekar. So, we have sort of developed a bond. You talked about bipartisan and working with people across the aisle. So today, I think at this point, I could share with you a sort of a deal we made. That is myself and Shekar. That is one of the most important issues to me this time around was immigration. The Dalka kids and the green card backlog people, roughly 1 million people total, million Indians. And we both agreed, doesn't matter who wins, let's take care of them. Let's see what we could do to get that issue solved. So, so hopefully, we still do not know who will win tonight. In fact, I would like to share and see if you can see this.
We can.
That's where we are at. This is my prediction for since this morning. So Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona. Fox News has already called Arizona, and this is what I had called Arizona for Biden. Now, I'm still calling Wisconsin and Michigan for Biden, but Pennsylvania for Trump. That's my projection, but let's see what happens.
And by the way, Ravi, I think it's going to be Friday before we know. Just the facts are we have to count all the votes, and particularly count all the votes, the mail-in ballots, the absentee ballots, and all the military ballots, which are significant in these states. So it could be Friday. We need to be patient as a country. We need to wait until the votes are counted. But I think I think Shali's right, by the way, that immigration is a cross-cutting issue. It's so incredible that the last time that anybody did anything significant on immigration, particularly as it relates to Asian immigration, is literally 25 years ago. And to not be able to work together on issues that really face the community, that are serious human problems, is just disgraceful. And that's what this country and politics should be about, is solving people's problems. So I'm 100% with you. And I do think a lot of good has come out of this whole process of engagement by the community. So I'll turn it back over to you, Avi, in case you had a question.
Well, absolutely. I mean, let's go back to 2016 for just a moment. And I'm so glad we get to wrap up our program with you guys, because you can provide some real context. I got a chance to meet Shali Kumar at the Republican National Convention in 2016. He was this man that had ostensibly given $1 million plus to President Trump. And we were like, who is this guy? And what I found is that the message that he was stating to us was the message that I heard from so many other Indian Americans around the country, in places that were, on the surface, liberal enclaves. And so I've seen the efforts that you've made, Shekar, the last 4 years to try to get the AAPI coalition and more specifically Indian Americans to re-engage with the Democratic Party. So talk about 2016 briefly, Shali, and where we are today. Because President Trump, I mean, it's one thing, what you did in 2016 will go down in history. You're going to get a lot of credit for getting Indian Americans involved in the Republican Party, because I've seen it firsthand from, and I'll name names since you guys are both here, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Kevin Cramer, Senator Ted Cruz. I've had conversations with all three men. All of them have said, hey, we love the Indian American community. We want them to be on our team. And this was not on the radar a decade ago. So Shali, talk about this escalation, because we have Howdy Modi a year ago. We have Namaste Trump this year. I mean, it's really been a sea change.
That's right, Ravi. And, if you remember the very first time we met in RNC meeting, so that was fun. But anyway, a little more seriously, first of all, I'd like to correct the record. I think too much of this goes on without really having proper data. I think it's the first time, 2020 is the first year where we are polling Indian Americans, because previously, 2008, 2012, they did not know how to poll Indian Americans. This was all bunched into Asian Americans. And then there was no polling for Hindu Americans. You know that I'm the founder of Republican Hindu Coalition. So I would like to state a record too, and you sort of know it, but there was a very scientific poll that was done in 2016 after the election. And for Hindus, now just in the battleground states, 6 battleground states, which we were given charge of, it was 65% for Trump and 35% for Hillary. So that record needs to be cleared to that. It was actually a very scientific poll with double quality control. That is checked again twice. So anyway, having said that, you also know that I'm extremely issue-oriented guy. So Newt Gingrich had set up a meeting with candidate Trump with me, and it was no time barred meeting. It was in Long Island. I met with candidate Trump, who was somewhat knowledgeable about India, but not about a whole lot of things. Like he did not know cross-border terrorism, that particular issue. He certainly did not know issues that are important to Hindus. And but he agreed on certain things, and he delivered on those. Of course, on the economy, I said in 2016, if you remember, that we could see 3 to 4% growth, GDP growth pre-COVID. He was able to deliver that, and a much more favorable relationship with India. See, previously in 2008 with McCain, 2012 with Mitt Romney, I would push for that. And they will not commit. They will not commit. They'll be very hesitant, talking like typical politicians. But when I brought that issue to candidate Trump at that time, he was very clear. There was an issue of selling LNG to liquid natural gas to India. That was not allowed before. There was issue of selling advanced weapon systems to India. That was not allowed before. Much more a treaty of defense cooperation, and then calling Pakistan to what it is, haven of terrorists. So cut off foreign aid to Pakistan. Probably that has been my issue for the last 10 years. And so he delivered on all that. I will admit to you, and as well as Shekar, that while candidate Trump agreed at the New Jersey rally with me on the immigration issue, but he was prevented from Stephen Miller from putting it in his speech. So in immigration issue, he did not agree. And for the next 4 years, that was not delivered. 98,000 Hindu American families left the country waiting for their green cards. And that's a hot issue for me. So, that he did not deliver on, but he did deliver on so many other issues. He did not deliver that much on trade either. That the trade with India did not really increase to the level it should have. And I know the reason for that also. And,
And Shali,
yeah.
On both those issues, and even on the issue of cross-border terrorism, even on the issue of China and its expansionism, there's not a whole lot of distance between the parties or the candidates today. The good news of that is that India has become a bipartisan relationship where both sides, generally speaking, now there are nuances and there are differences, always in substance, at times in implementation, but there isn't much difference. So that, to me, that is the best news that we could have for the relationship long term. But where you and I will differ is that there is a huge generational divide. The immigrants who came here, and of course there are a very large number that came after 2000, have a point of view and a connection to India that is very different than our children and their children. So there is a first and second generation who's going to act differently, care differently about those issues, and vote differently. So whether we put people and say, are you Hindu American, are you Indian American, or are you an American of Indian heritage, which is or South Asian, you see all these variations on the theme. It is because people are trying to create American identity, and that sometimes conflicts with the separation or the linguistic differences we bring from India. So all I would say is that whatever the party and however this particular election pans out, what we've managed to do is activate thousands of people and made people realize that it's not just about the money. Yes, our money is always important, as you and I know in politics, and fundraising is important, and having people who have resources is, but it's about delivering the votes. And we have certainly done our part on the Democratic side. And I believe that actually the Republicans have done as well. They've spent money, they've spent time, they've catered to the community. Hopefully that is maintained, and we can bridge this generational divide with issues that are much more concrete for our children, rather than simply making them into Indian issues and American issues.
Shekar, I think you bring up a great point, and I'd love for Shali to respond to it, is that there has been a real dichotomy during this campaign that I've seen a shift, this umbrella that the Democratic Party has, where you have the progressive left and you have more moderates. And I would say Joe Biden is ostensibly in the middle, but this campaign that he's been running is supposed to be the most progressive ever for the Democrats. Where do Indian Americans fit in this? Because we see it all over the board, and it is generational. I do see a big divide. We just had Karthik Ramakrishnan on, who told us that middle-aged men, basically from about my age to your age, are veering towards President Trump. Or at least President Trump's made a huge amount of ground towards these folks, and even though by and large the whole community is still supporting the Biden-Harris ticket. So let's talk about that dichotomy that I'm sure you both have digested. You've seen firsthand. Where do Indian Americans fit in these political parties? Shally, why don't you go ahead first?
Okay, actually, on the point which Shekar makes and you make, I agree. There is a different mentality for people. First generation Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, and the second is the the younger folks, like my children born here. My children who are in business with me, they are Republican. Who are not with me, they are Democrats. So that thing is there. But India is important. That the Republican Hindu Coalition was formed after my visit with the Republican Jewish Coalition. So I want to have Republican Hindu Coalition become like a Republican Jewish Coalition. You see, in terms of the Jewish American community, they see if the numbers are roughly 65% or so are Democrats and 35% or so are Republicans. But on issues relating to Israel, that 99%, they're all on the same issue, moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. And all those issues, they are together. And, I hope the same thing will happen here, where Indian Americans, Hindu Americans get more political power. I hope to really, if Biden wins, I really hope, because I know where Shekar's heart is, that he gets a real serious position in foreign policy, so we could prevent Biden from, he was given Crescent of Pakistan, and the relationship with China is kind of don't know what it is. There is lots of allegations. I don't know whether they're true or not, but their allegations are there. So it's important for India to face up to China. It's important for India to, of course, face up to Pakistan. And that will be one area of concern I would have in Biden presidency. Another point I would like to make, often I've heard that, Biden was quite prominent. He played a prominent role in getting the civil nuclear deal. But not very many people know this. And your audience should know that. Yeah, that was a gigantic effort, and we applaud Senator Biden and maybe now President Biden for coming through with this. But I will tell you that even though the civil nuclear deal was done in 2006, 2007 timeframe, but until Modi and Trump came to power together, there was zero, not one iota of energy was produced in an Indian nuclear power plant. It was just stuck there. It needed both Modi and Trump to do that. In fact, I remember in early 2014, when I led the congressional delegation to end Modi's boycott from United States and his visa ban. Somebody approached me. There was a senior executive of Westinghouse, and they said they will have chairman of Westinghouse fly to India next morning if I could get something done with respect to the nuclear power plants sitting idle, billions of dollars invested, but sitting idle for the last 7, 8, 9 years. So yes, he could be credited for that, but you have to have things happen, actions take place. We don't want to have Biden go to say, okay, because this has been the policy for lots of American presidents, including Republican, whether it's George Bush, all American presidents, they kind of take a balanced line, sort of a balanced line.
I don't think
with respect to Pakistan.
I don't think actually that can happen, because look, we have a geopolitical situation now with China that everyone has faced up to, whether it has been technology that has been stolen from the US, IP, whether it has been the dramatic change in the relationship on the ground in terms of incursions, in terms of expansionism in the South China Seas. I think this has been a massive wake-up call. And I don't know that the answer is tariffs. I think the answer is, in fact, to build that Quad and to build that Indo-Pacific. You have to have defense, you have to have trade, and where to me, frankly, Donald Trump failed was in trade. And we can argue about this, but the bottom line is you don't put tariffs on your friends. You enlist your friends to beat your enemies. That's what you do with tariffs. And at the end of the day, it just costs the American consumer, and you have to subsidize it. But there is a way to create that balance. But I will say this, and this is really important because this is not, again, partisan. The bottom line is Republicans need to do a hell of a lot better job on social issues if they're going to keep the next generation. Democrats need to do a heck of a lot of better job of explaining what they're going to do on the economy. And the answer on the economy isn't as simplistic as cut taxes and lower regulation. The answer is, how do you create more equity? How do you build a middle class and a successful educational system? So trade with India, trade with Asia Pacific is dramatically important for that. Any Democrat who's considering business communities has to deal with that and face up to it. I hope that's a place that, in fact, both sides can bridge their differences, because it's quite possible we end up with a Biden presidency, which is obviously what I've worked hard for, but also with a Senate that remains perhaps either 50-50 or very close. So people are going to have to figure out how to work together again, rather than my way or the highway. I hope, Shali, that's what happens in this next 4 years, is we rebuild some of these bridges and we start working on economics and equity in a much better way for all people, including Indian Americans.
I mean, what was the last bipartisan thing that happened? Was it basically the stimulus? Because that hasn't seemed to work very well, and we're still waiting for the next stimulus. I mean, there's so many people, the folks that are not on the screen, but there's tens of millions of people that are really struggling, and we have no stimulus. COVID-19 is going to go on for many, many months, if not another year or so. Where is the spirit of bipartisanship? That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you both on, because I think you both are willing to work with the other side. And I see so much basically obstinance from the folks that are currently in power. Shali?
Well, first of all, Ravi, I once again, kudos to you for connecting me with Shekar. Just what he said on social issues and economic issues. Both. I could not agree with him more. I mean, I just totally agree with him. Just look at it. One person dedicated so much to Biden, and me being dedicated to Trump, but we agree. We agree on so many issues, and so that's really good partnership. And Shekar, I will agree with you also on trade. On if there was a right president, and I hope once again, if you are into that position, perhaps you could do that. Right now, we do about $100 billion a year trade between US and India. That could easily go to 300 billion, 400 billion a year. And that's possible. But what we have not done, Trump administration has really not done much. And I know that too. I'll disclose that also here. Ravi, in front of you, in front of your audience, as to why that has not taken place.
But that's something we
Perhaps,
should work on, because Republican
perhaps
senators.
Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, is a close friend of mine. She spent a full week at my home, and then when first time she came to the United States back in 2012, and then I've spent a lot of time with her in India. So Nirmala Sitharaman, I know her inside out, how she thinks. And Americans, unfortunately, with Trump, we did not approach her correctly. I mean, of course, the final decisions are made by Modi, but she has a lot to do with this, because Modi trusts Nirmala Sitharaman quite a bit. And if there is a Biden presidency, and Shekar has something to do with again relationship with India, with his trade and foreign policy and all that, I'll give him pointers as to how to deal with Nirmala Sitharaman.
The best way to build this relationship and to make our children care, is to build the trade and the cultural ties. Those two.
That's right.
And it's not enough to say, I can take you to India and you spend 3 weeks and visit all your family and come back. That's not heritage. That's not interlinking. It's about culture and exchange, and it's about trade. If you make India important enough to the United States on a trade basis, on the basis of investments on both sides, we can be challenging China. That's what I think a Biden presidency can bring, is the opportunity for that to happen. And the fact that Indian Americans have become significant in his campaign. Look at the number. I mean, there's a significant number in the senior staff level of Indian Americans. And notwithstanding your best wishes, guys, I have no particular inkling or desire to be inside the government. But I absolutely want to influence this change of thinking about how do you deal with these relationships? How do you use the communities in the US to create that cross-border culture and trade? I think that's the opportunity the United States has that is uniquely positioned to take advantage of. But it's going to take a president who understands that, accepts that, and wants it to happen. I think that person is still Joe Biden. And Shelley, from your lips to all the Hindu gods and goddesses, it's either 270, 268, or it's 289. I think it's going to be 289 on Friday evening when everything is counted.
Could be. You could be right. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said. Increase the trade level between US and India to 400 billion. Right now with China is 500 billion, right? Increase it to 400 billion. And you see over there how everything changes.
Absolutely.
And again, there is one thing which is very common, which is very, let's say, sentimental to me, which is very important to me. And that is, again, the philosophy of Israel. I want to have US and India relationship absolutely at the top. Just like the United States is tied to the hip with United Kingdom, but United Kingdom is not that big of an economy. Let India's economy become bigger than even Chinese economy and have a $400 billion a year trade, and then have US and India walk, the two largest democracies, walk step locked in step with each other across the world. That will be the best thing for the world.
I agree. And strengthen the UN, put India on the Security Council.
That's right.
All that is possible. It will take bipartisanship to make it happen, though. Again, it can't happen without a Senate support. And you bring those fellas along. We don't have to agree on everything, but if we agree on certain things, we can get those done.
Well, I want to give you guys both a little bit of news here as we get press releases and notifications from candidates from around the country. Neeraj Antani was just elected to the Ohio State Senate. He's the first Indian American state senator in Ohio history. He's a Republican. So congratulations to Neeraj Antani, who will go from the House of Representatives in Ohio to the state Senate. So that's news. Of course, earlier tonight, we had Jennifer Rajkumar, who got elected officially to the New York State Assembly. Keisha Ram is headed to the state Senate in Vermont. They're both Democratic women. So I want to wrap up with your thoughts about all these Indian American candidates. Obviously, the big one that, frankly, we've not talked about enough tonight because the oxygen has gone to Biden and Trump, but there is someone that's the vice presidential, nominee, which is Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris from my great state here of California. She has a chance to be the first Indian American to be at that level, which is incredible. And then, of course, we have a couple of other Indian Americans that are running for Congress, and Shri Preston Kulkarni, who's in a tight battle, as well as Harold Tippinani in Scottsdale. So talk about this evolution of Indian Americans getting involved at every level of politics. Shekar, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So, one of the good things about this conversation is we need Indian Americans who are running on the Democratic side and the Republican side. So I'm glad to hear about Neeraj, but he's an outlier. When you look at who's in Congress, who's run for the Senate, when you look at Sarah Gideon or Kamala Harris, you realize it's leaned heavily in the Democratic side. It would be great if it were, by the way, on both sides, and you don't have to be crazy ideological either way in order to win elections, at least in purple states, right? And there are plenty of purple states out there, as we discovered tonight. There are at least 8 or 10 that I think can go either way, and that's good for America. So bottom line, is it important that we have people who look like us in these offices? Absolutely, of course, obviously. Is it important that we have people in positions in staff and in campaigns? Yes, and they are there. Thousands of volunteers on both sides in this campaign, as an example, who are Indian American and Asian American. But the biggest single thing is, how many of them are supported by the Indian American community? Because what I realized in the early years of Obama was there were a lot of people who went into the White House or into office, and while they were Indian American and they had connections and they looked like you and me, they didn't necessarily get supported by the community to get there in the first place or to when they got out of there. And so I think we have an obligation collectively to create the systems and the networks to support people from our community. Listen, if you were Armenian and you were running for office, the first place you would go for money and support is the Armenian American community. It's true of the Jewish community. It's true of every ethnic community. We are building that infrastructure on the Democratic side. I think it should be built on the Republican side as well, because if you do build it, that's what will produce the talent in the long run and assimilate us and keep us powerful.
Totally agree.
Well, we've had a lot of agreement tonight. That's rare. I don't know if we've had a Democrat and a Republican on agreeing to this degree. It's been a long time. I don't know.
You're the one who has put us together. So.
Yes. So Ravi, you are the matchmaker here.
Well, I really would like to see this country heal, because there is so much division. And I didn't grow up at a time where we were at each other's throats because you were Indian or Pakistani or Hindu or Muslim or Sikh. I mean, I grew up in a very wonderful, maybe utopic kind of era. People like my father and people like you gentlemen who grew up and they put all that identity stuff aside. And I remember as a kid, just to share a personal story, my father was involved in something called the Pakistan-India Friendship Society. I don't know how long it lasted. It didn't last that long, and it's not going on now. But, this was the mentality of that generation of Indian Americans that came across the pond, who literally came on ships 50, 60 years ago. And so obviously there's many more of us, and some of the differences are going to get pointed out. And we've seen that in this campaign, certainly. I mean, we've seen a lot of differences even within the Democratic Party. And in fact, we even had someone on just a short time ago, Rina Shah, who is a Republican who's anti-Trump and is supporting Biden. So certainly ideologically things have changed dramatically. And as our population grows, I mean, in case folks aren't aware of this, the Indian American community is now the second largest immigrant group in the country. And in 21 states, we're the second largest immigrant group after Mexicans. So we've grown tremendously. It's allowed someone like me to be able to showcase different points of views from all over the country. And this is just the start. I mean, that's for sure what Shally triggered with the Republican Party in 2016, because I'm going to give a lot of that credit to Shally and his efforts. Certainly, I've seen what Shekar's done over the years, going into Nevada, getting all of this get out the vote infrastructure, which you didn't talk about at all, Shekar, but I know you guys have done tremendous outreach to AAPI communities. It's a real credit to you both. And we'll see how these parties showcase the talent we have in the community, because there certainly is so much talent that we can share.
And all I would say is I echo that, and I hope Shally does. Get the election over with, declare a winner, do it peacefully, have a transition, and then go build the future for our children. That's what America should be about.
Agreed. Once again.
Well, we're gonna save this video, and we're gonna share this with Republicans and Democrats next time they have some kind of spat to say we can have two distinguished gentlemen that actually can agree on a great many of the issues.
And we need to work together in order to make them happen. That's the important thing.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to let you both go because I know you're both on the Eastern time zone and we're out here and it's still very early on the West Coast. So Shekar Narasimhan, Shally Kumar, real pleasure to see you both. Stay well, stay healthy. Sorry we couldn't do this in person, but I'm glad you're here with us tonight on election night.
Great. Great. Thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Shekar.
Thank you, and namaste. Good night.
Namaste.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we are going to wrap up our program with a couple of final updates here from the elections. So I've just been handed a note. First of all, as I just mentioned, Neeraj Ohtani will head to the Ohio State Senate. Congratulations to Neeraj. He was trying to be here tonight, but obviously, more importantly for him, he is now going to the state Senate. And we have Sarah Gideon, an update on the race in Maine. Sarah Gideon and Susan Collins. Susan Collins, the incumbent Democrats, against Susan Collins, the incumbent Republican, and Sarah Gideon, the Democrat. And Gideon right now, who is Indian American and Armenian American, she trails Susan Collins with 48% of the precincts reporting, 51 to 41. Still a ways to go, about half the precincts reporting. And of course, as we mentioned earlier tonight, Raja Krishnamoorthi, he is on his way to victory in Illinois. He's again been a stalwart congressman as a Democrat for a number of years now. He is on his way to re-election, so we'll see Raja Krishnamoorthi once again in the House of Representatives. Another update that we want to give is Ami Bera. Ami Bera, who is in the Sacramento region. Ami Bera has had some really tight races over the years. And this one, obviously a lot of the reporting is still coming down, and we never know with absentee ballots. One thing about California in particular, they give you up to 17 days to count the vote total. So we may not have the full results for Ami Bera's race. But Bera seems to have a big command tonight, 62% of the vote versus 37% versus his Republican challenger, with about 56% of the precincts reporting. I don't want to go overboard because I've seen these very tight races in that 7th district historically, but Ami Bera, of course, is the longest standing member of Congress that's Indian American. He's been there the longest now, and it appears, at least as of right now, that he's on his way to re-election, though those numbers could tighten up since historically that's a very tight race. And of course, also in California, we'll go over to the 17th district, which is where Ro Khanna presides. Ro Khanna, of course, we had one of his competitors on earlier, Dr. Vanila Singh, who challenged him a couple of years ago for this district that she grew up in. Ro Khanna is on his way to a pretty easy victory against Ritesh Tandon, who's also Indian American. This race has been fascinating, of course. Where Diya TV broadcasts from is the 17th district, and there are so many Indian Americans, South Asians in this district. And again, we had Dr. Japra on, who supported Ro Khanna earlier on, now put his support behind Ritesh Tandon. But Khanna is on his way to a very easy victory with about 55% of the precincts reporting. But this is a very strong blue district, and there's no surprise there with Khanna 77-23 over Tandon. We have another race here, Pramila Jayapal in Seattle. Pramila Jayapal, a progressive Indian American Democrat with a very strong following. It had a challenger who, frankly, we had a hard time finding information on her challenger because Pramila Jayapal is very well liked in her district, and that district's a unique one that went through a lot of strife over the summer with that district called the Chomp. But Jayapal is on her way to a blowout win, 85-15 over her Republican challenger there. And Jayapal and Khanna have obviously rankled some folks in the Indian American community going back to the Kashmir situation from a year ago, which we haven't talked about too much tonight. But certainly Jayapal will be heading back to the U.S. House of Representatives. And then, of course, with regard to the Harold Tippinani race, which is one that is one we've been watching in Scottsdale. She has a chance to head to Congress. We had Dr. Tipirneni on earlier tonight. Very, very tight race. And it's something that we'll be monitoring. She's taking on the incumbent Republican, David Schweikert. Tipirneni has run a couple of times now. This was a different district 2 years ago. She ran a different district, fell short. This time she moved. She actually lives right on the border of this particular district. And right now, as the votes are coming in, again, just 1% of the precincts reporting. It is 52 to 47. Tipirneni is ahead of Schweikert. And that precinct number might be incorrect, actually, but it is about 55% of the precincts reporting. Apologies for that typo there on the graphic. But Tipirneni is up 52 to 47, about a little over half the precincts reporting now. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that race throughout the week, frankly, as Dr. Tipirneni said earlier on the program, that they expect the counting to go on for days. But Arizona, there's a real distinct chance that could go for Joe Biden tonight. We're getting all these different results. Rhode Island, a very tight race between Biden and Trump. North Carolina appears to be leaning to Trump. So is Florida. Ohio was officially declared for President Trump tonight. Of course, the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, all going to Joe Biden. So there were some reports and some folks that we work with that told me that perhaps we would have a sense of who would win by the end of our broadcast, but that is not going to happen tonight. We do not know who's going to win right now. Of course, 270 electoral college votes is what is needed, and so far, we're nowhere close to that. But Biden does have an edge. He's won more electoral college votes so far, and but Trump has won more states. And we have one more quick. Oh, and of course, I can't forget about Jennifer Rajkumar, who is heading to the New York State Assembly, first Indian American woman ever to serve in Albany. She won in a blowout as well. We had Jennifer on earlier on in the program, had a very convincing primary win, and now tonight in the general election. And it was probably the biggest blowout in the Assembly. So we had Jennifer on, and of course, Keisha Ram, who took care of business in Vermont, winning that state Senate seat. So quite a few folks that can celebrate tonight. We'll have more Indian Americans and more South Asian candidates entering state houses and potentially Congress as well. We will see how things shape out with the Tipirneni race, as well as Sri Preston Kulkarni, who we're still getting data on his race. That is a seat that's vacant now. The current Republican incumbent steps aside, Pete Olson. And so Sri Preston Kulkarni, who's a Democrat, has an opportunity in a very, very diverse suburban Houston community, has a chance to enter Congress. But it seems that that vote is still being counted. As in Texas, though, we do have an update from the Electoral College results right now. It is Biden 209, Trump 118. That's the latest polling results. If we're still very early on, we are projecting that Texas is going to Trump, and again, a lot of the West Coast states have gone to Biden. So it's still very early. The Democratic House control is still being decided right now. The Democrats have got 206 seats versus 180 seats for the Republican Party. You need 218 for control, so the Democrats have gained at least one seat tonight, but that's still in the balance. And of course, the all-important Senate race. The Senate races have become of extreme importance for Democrats, obviously, after the 6-3 advantage for the Republican Party, or at least Republican-appointed judges on the Supreme Court. And right now, from the Electoral College standpoint, we have it at 209 to 118, but that is getting updated constantly as we're still waiting for so many results. Maine is 51 to 46 Biden, and we've called that for Maine. There's still a lot to sort out. Minnesota appears to be going to Joe Biden tonight. So there's still a lot to flesh out. We're going to find out in the coming days who won this election, because the way this is going to work, Pennsylvania is going to get a number of days to keep counting ballots. Florida, in an enormous turnout. North Carolina is truly neck and neck. 95% of the votes are in, and President Trump leads 50 to 49. Pennsylvania right now, Trump is up 56 to 42 with 58% of the precincts reporting. So we'll see if any of these numbers change. It's been a remarkable night on so many levels. And we'll continue to monitor the progress all week long. I have so many thank yous to give tonight, as we have extended our coverage a little bit, just because we've had some revelations tonight, including some bipartisanship on display between Shali Kumar and Shekar Narasimhan. So we wanted to stay here for that discussion. But from the breaking news that Jennifer Rajkumar has won to Kesha Ram, there's a lot to celebrate in the community, and obviously the Democrats are trying to make their push to get Joe Biden into the Oval Office, and President Trump. If all the polls that came out to say President Trump did not look like he was going to get reelected, it's been Trump has held the line quite a bit, and so this outcome is still in doubt. And I think that's a remarkable part of this country, is that despite all the efforts of the prognosticators to figure out what Americans are thinking, when people go into that ballot booth and or they do that absentee ballot, there's I don't know if we're all ideologues or we're actually somewhat in the middle, because these races are extremely tight. So that's going to wrap up our coverage tonight. And I really appreciate all the guests that we have on. I could name them all, but I'd be here for another 10 minutes. And we want to give our staff the rest of the night off. But thank you all very much. We really appreciate your time. For our entire team, thanks for watching. And we will see you on the other side with full coverage as Election 2020 will continue in the days ahead.